me, aren't you?
That's right. Yeah, yeah. I'm near Oxford. I'm due south of Oxford.
Oh,
Actually,
right. Okay, so more
I'm
southeast.
actually the second house in Oxfordshire, which borders with Buckinghamshire. So
Wow.
the house down the road to us just is in Buckinghamshire. You know, there's no rivalry or
So
anything.
that's the directions to your house then? Just get to Buckinghamshire, and when you get to Oxfordshire, you're the second house.
That's it.
That's brilliant. That makes things really
That's where I
easy.
live. Yeah.
So you've done so many things, and I always try and find different ways to structure things, but I think it makes sense to sort of move chronologically. But I wanted to start off with a quote that I've heard from you, just like really kind of basic philosophy of being in the studio was don't just make it sound good, make it special. And
Ooh,
yeah, that was
did
a
I
good
say
one.
that?
You like that?
Yeah.
Yeah, well, you said it. And it's, I think what's amazing about it as I've been going through both the playlist you sent me, the stuff you've worked on, and just going through your discography, and obviously I'm familiar with a lot of the records already, is how varied they are and also how special they are. Like there are albums from the 80s which have that, like, okay, those are the synthesizer sounds that were going on, but what you were doing to the drums, that could be like right now, that could, like, super distorted kick drums with really long sustains, and like they're just always,
They weren't meant to be distorted.
oh no, I think they were, absolutely. I think it was a magazine track actually with where the
Oh
kick
yeah,
and snare had some great,
yeah.
like, just grit on them, you know.
Yeah, I know.
So anyway, and the other thing when I was telling people that you were going to do this, I was telling you this earlier, is so many people said, "Oh, John Leckie, he's done 3 of my top 5 favorite records," but it's not the same 3 records for everybody. Everybody has different records that are their favorites that you've done. And
Oh,
as we walk through kind of the career, it's just sort of insane. I mean, I used to joke, and I might as well do it to your face too, that you're almost like the Forrest Gump of audio. Like you've just been there for so many
is that a
moments.
compliment? I don't
I mean,
know.
because
Yeah,
even right from the very beginning, like what's so you started at Abbey Road,
yeah.
right, as a tape op, and I think if anyone watched the interview with Ken Scott, that the progression of the jobs, I don't think it had really changed a whole lot by the time you got there. So you started as a tape op, and did you come up through the mastering room and the tech
No,
shop, or
no,
you went
no.
straight to engineering from
I
tape op?
was I was employed as a tape op. I wasn't employed to work in the library or as an apprentice or something, or to be trained even. I was employed as a tape operator on something like I think £840 a year. I got working 147 hours a week, you know, and after that it was overtime. But that's different. Yeah, I was employed as a tape operator, and from the first day was sit there and watch and don't touch anything. And I guess by the second day, I was running tapes backwards and forwards and
Wow.
things. So, but I never set up microphones. You never touched the desk. You never unplugged anything. If anything went wrong, if the headphones packed up, you phoned up the amp room. It was known as the amp room.
Right.
It was the maintenance, and it's always known as, oh, he's an amp room guy. You know, it's phone up the amp room, get another pair of headphones. You know, and they would have to come down and plug in the headphones and test them because you didn't leave the tape machine.
Right.
You know, the tape op. No one touched the tape except you. You know, stop, start, or anything. You couldn't start the machine, so very often the engineer wouldn't start it unless you were there in the room. You know,
So you're doing all the
it sounds
punching
funny.
in. You're
Sorry.
you're doing all the punching then as
Oh, of
well.
course.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Which is, I mean, that can be a pretty high stress thing to be doing, especially if you're not experienced in sessions, to immediately be thrown into something where you're going to be punching in on an overdub. Like
Yeah.
that's got to
But
be kind of
that's
hairy.
doing an edit and things, you know, editing sections. You know, it's all very well editing an end, you know, going that way. But when you have to insert something and take something out, you know, that's pretty scary when you've only been there, you know, a week or two. You
Yeah.
know, but they let you do it, you know, or they can't be bothered and they just assume you're the tape op, even though been there a month and you're doing it. It's not like you've been, you know, nearly all the other. It's funny you should say that because you know Alan Parsons started at the factory, I think, didn't he? And then the tape library, and most people went through the tape library. And
Yeah.
even then, you never became, even when you were a tape op, you never became a balance engineer until you'd been through mastering, which
Yeah.
gave you a great thing about getting it on the record and that kind of thing. And I don't know, compression and bassing. I never did that. I never did mastering. I just went from being a tape op to being an engineer in the studio.
And were you sort of a special case, or had they stopped their sort of standard progression at that point?
I've got no idea. No,
Yeah.
I wasn't a special case.
Right, so they'd kind of given up on it. Because Ken was saying, I mean, he ended up cutting all of the UK plates for Motown.
Oh, yeah.
So he's just upstairs studying Motown, trying to make his cut sound like their cut.
That's right, yeah. And Chris Blair carried on, because Chris Blair, when I first started, Chris Blair had Room 24, which was mono singles. He just had one big speaker in front of him, one big not stereo, didn't do albums, he just did mono singles, and that was Chris. You know, he was 19 years old, you know.
Wow. Amazing. So this was in 1970?
Yeah, 1970.
1970. And you immediately worked, and you've described it, and anyone who's listened to people who were working at Abbey Road at that time, I mean, your session could be anything. It could be classical, it could be pop, it could be a comedy album. But at the same time, it was also, for you, all four Beatles working on different solo things, Pink Floyd, Roy Harper. That's pretty cool. That's a pretty good group.
That's all I knew, you know. I mean, that was it. I'll tell you a little secret is that before I got the job, I went to college. I went to Ravensbourne College of Art when they had a television course, film and TV course. It was called Moving Picture Communication, MPC, RCAD at Ravensbourne College. This was 67, 68. And the natural progression was to go in the BBC after the college. So from A-levels, you do 2 years of college and then go in the BBC and become a technical operator, which again could be radio, TV, or anything. It was very varied. And I didn't want to do that. Most of the guys at college didn't want to do that. They wanted to go off and make films and be freelance, because it was 1968, you know. And I wanted to be a film director, and I worked in a film company, and but I'd always, and at college, I did a thesis on electronic music. It was 1968, I suppose. I started in 67. And I used to go around record shops taking notes from the back of Stockhausen records. And, you know, because there was no, the Moog synthesizer had just come out. No one knew what it was. And even the word synthesizer was an unheard of word before the 60s, I suppose. I mean, it wasn't a common thing that you saw on a record cover that someone played a synthesizer. I mean, what does it sound like? You know, it was like, this was my feeling, you know, when I was like 17. And I wasn't a musician, you know, and I was just really into the music. And then I guess everything got psychedelic, everything, Jimi Hendrix and Pink Floyd and those things all happening. And it took me into a film world, really, a visual world. And what was I was going back to when I started at Abbey Road at that time. I'd never really hung out with musicians. I had one or two friends that played piano or guitar, but I didn't like. I was always at gigs. I was all from 13, I suppose, for 7 years before. I'd see 2 or 3 gigs a week.
Right, just as a fan.
As a fan, yeah. And you could go to them, even as a 13, 15-year-old, you could go to the Marquee, because a lot of them weren't licensed. Like Marquee was just sold milkshakes and Coca-Cola. A lot of these places, you know, the licensing thing, you could go to gigs. I saw the Stones when I was 13 at Kilburn State Ballroom.
Wow.
On a Friday night. And every Friday night they had this, you know, disco with a band playing. It was the Rolling Stones. Gene Vincent I saw there. Bo Diddley I saw there. The Mersey Beats and the Swinging Blue Jeans and the Searchers, you know. And every Friday it was a different band. And I was like 13 or 14. Well, actually, I was probably 14 or 15, 1965, 64.
So how was the Stones gig? Because I mean that's what, like 1,000 people tops in there. I mean, how many people would you get in there?
It's 150, I suppose. It's
Really,
quite
that's
small.
small.
Yeah,
That's
became a
small,
bingo hall. It's smaller than Hammersmith Palais was. It's
right?
Kilburn State Ballroom. So in Kilburn High Road, there's a massive cinema called Gaumont State, and it's all Art Deco, and they have got a huge Wurlitzer organ that would play during the interval in between the films. The big Wurlitzer would come up from the stage,
Yeah.
like a raised platform. And it was huge, this place. It's still there. It's called Gaumont State. But round the corner, what was known as the State Ballroom, which was a ballroom which had a ballroom dance floor. And there wasn't a balcony. Hammersmith Palais had a balcony. But anyway, they had bands on. And then it became a bingo hall. And now it's like a carpet furniture warehouse.
Right.
It's terrible.
So... But so you
that-
didn't have any background in audio other than possibly some ancillary stuff while you're studying film in school, right?
Well, I made amplifiers and stuff, and I also, part of my college thing was to do what in England what's called City and Guilds. So I did City and Guilds electronics, part of the TV and film thing, as well as photography, and I already had A-level, advanced level physics and stuff.
Right.
And that probably, and I always thought, well, how did I get this job at Abbey Road? Because everything's happening fast, and it's not till years later that you look back and go, how did I get that job? What was I doing?
Yeah.
And what I was doing was not wanting to go in the BBC and realizing I couldn't be a film director. I couldn't be Goddard or Fellini or Louis Brunel or something and go off and make,
Right.
or underground films, and so I thought, what else can I do? I'll write letters to the recording studios, and I got the job. And
It's amazing.
And then I never took a day off after that. From the first day, my whole life changed, because it was 7 days a week. You never see your friends. You never watch TV. You never go to another gig or anything. It's a totally different work for every day for a year, but still within the music.
Yeah, amazing. Because usually there's some sort of epiphany some people who got into it, their families were in it, or an uncle or whatever. Like, Al Schmidt's uncle owned a studio, so he grew up visiting the studio. But someone like me, no one in my family did anything like that. And you sort of, at some point, you see a studio and you kind of like, oh, there's making records. But it sounds like your epiphany was when you actually got to Abbey Road. Like, you decided to write to the studios, and then...
I was... My other image of a studio way before was Radio Luxembourg used to do in about 1965 or something, used to do a radio show. And sometimes you get tickets, and sometimes the BBC would do a live broadcast, and you could pick up tickets and stuff. And I went to this Radio Luxembourg, which radio show with a band playing, and like a Ready Steady Go audience thing, but it was only on the radio. And it was in this building in Marble Arch. I'm not certain where it was, somewhere down there. This is like 1963 or 4 or something. And I looked through, everyone was in the studio and the band was playing, and we were meant to clap and stuff. And as I looked through in this dark room, there were these people sitting there with all the controls, and it was all like flashing lights and things. And it was a spaceship. It was just like looking at people riding a spaceship. And I thought, shit, look at that. It's like, it really is up in, in a little space capsule. And I always envisaged that. And of course, when I got into a real studio, when I walked into Abbey Road and saw the mixer with all the controls, I was back in that. I just wanted to be in that space.
That's funny. So there's your moment where you see the sausage getting made and think, like, that's amazing. That's amazing. Yeah. We'll be here for weeks if I go this silly, but I'm curious, because you went to so many gigs, is there one that stands out in your memory, just that was absolutely mind-blowing? It could be an artist that just disappeared the next day, but I mean, were there any sort of transcendent gigs from that kind of teenage year that were mind-blowing? And if not, we'll just move on.
Yeah, everything. Every gig was mind blowing. You go to school the next day and your ears are ringing and that kind. Best gigs, Graham Bond organisation at Klux Cleek. We used to go to a club in called Klux Cleek above the Railway Hotel, West End Lane, West Hampstead. And it was a jazz club, but they had lots and lots of different people. John Mayall, Eric Clapton. I suppose before Cream, before 1964, 65, and start of 66, me and my mates, we probably saw every John Mayall and Eric Clapton gig within the area of London. We'd been able
Wow.
to drive somewhere, North London, South London, Bromley or Lewisham or something. And we just like follow around John Mayall and Eric Clapton and went through all that change with Peter Green and different bass players, Jack Bruce, but always Graham Bond organisation was even better
Wow.
than that for transcending things. When you hear it now, it's really rough, and it's but the Hammond, the tonality of everything, they were the best gigs, and people and everything. It was great. Other ones you could say was, well, Jimi Hendrix at Roundhouse. I saw that.
Wow.
Stones in the Park was pretty good. Yeah, what a gigs. They're vibes, really. It's what the vibes are.
Yeah.
We went to see The Who at the Starlight Ballroom, Greenford, on the Sunday after they did Anyway Anyhow on Ready Steady Go, which was on the Friday night. And on the Sunday night, they were playing a ballroom, a Starlight Ballroom, it's called, in Greenford in West London, near the Hoover factory when you go out on the M40.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
And it's Perryvale, there, around there. And I've tried to trace this place. It's really weird, but it's called the Starlight Ballroom, and there's a record of them playing on a Sunday. And we went there, and it was great because we tried to go to the Goldhook Club in Goldhook Road where the Who were and everything. And it was always really rough. It was always like, you couldn't park, or there was fights, there was police vans everywhere and all kinds of things. So we ended up at the Starlight Ballroom, and as we walked in, the whole place was vibrating. And they had the bass amp turned full on. The band weren't on stage. They were waiting to come on. But the bass amp was just feeding back. And everything was shaking. All the light fittings and everything was all rattling. And then the band came on and just like did their thing and everything. This is true. And Pete Townsend had the Rickenbacker, the brown Rickenbacker, red Rickenbacker, which was a bit beaten up anyway. He had 2 or 3 guitars, which he would change. But the Rickenbacker, he used that and smashed it up. And this girl who we knew called Linda Griesby, her name was, she picked up the machine head of Pete Townsend's guitar and put it in her bag, you see. And this is all my memories. And
Wow.
we used to meet at the Wimpy Bar in Kilburn High Road. And she would have Pete Townsend would say, "Kate, can we see Pete's guitar?" And she'd had the broken headstock.
So she always had it with her
in her handbag, yeah, and would show you it.
Amazing. So, I mean, you just went from Uber fan to making records you wanted to hear, basically, in a way. So, all right, let's talk about a couple specific things from the Abbey Road days, the early Abbey Road days, because they're actually 2 of my top 5 in the world are from 1970 and 1971 from Abbey Road, and you worked on both of them. So the first is, can we just talk about Roy Harper a little bit, Stormcock? Because I think that is still one of the most astounding records I've ever heard. And I heard it for the first time only about 3 years ago and was just, I'm mad that I didn't listen to it for the 25 years leading up to that. So I'd love to just hear about it, because I got to meet Roy and we were talking about it, and he said that your credit, and I don't know, because now there are no credits anymore, but originally your credit on that record was help. Because you were, I guess you were still tape-op at that point, but you were extra hands for the mixes.
Right. That is my credit on it, yeah. Yeah, I just started. I mean, I'm just like 3 or 4 months in, really, from when I started in February, and Stormcock would probably be in June or July or something. I didn't do a lot of the recording, But for some reason, they'd get me in for editing, for chopping things around. But my one memory of it was Me and My Woman. I did some of the mixing with Peter Bown, with some other people in Room 4. But my one memory of it was doing Me and My Woman, you know that track, with the orchestra waiting in Studio 2. I don't know how many people were on the Me and My Woman strings. It's David Bedford Orchestra. It might have been 24 or something, 24 strings, waiting for us to edit the 8-track verse and chorus and compile the finished thing, which of course is 12 minutes, 15 minutes long, you know.
Yeah.
There's take 1, take 2, and it goes through different sections. And David Bedford and we'd done a stereo edit, but hadn't edited the 8-track, if you see what I mean.
Yeah,
so
yeah.
David Bedford had done his arrangement on the stereo edit, which we'd listened to, and no one had thought of editing the 8-track. And it was like, fucking hell, the orchestra's here, you know, and it's like, send the tape. And you're like, what tape? You know, it hasn't been edited. You can't send the stereo, you know, the rough mix.
Yeah.
And so while the audience, and I had to, under Roy's stoned instruction, edit verse, chorus of Me and My Woman for this 15-minute song while the orchestra's waiting. That was my memory of Stormcock.
That's a little pressure. That's a little, yeah. And he was saying that you were the 2 extra hands for all the mixes too. That, like, you know, there'd be echo send moves and things like that. Because it's a pretty, it's, for people who don't know it, you should just take the 40 minutes and go listen to the record. It's 4 songs. It's got Jimmy Page on it. It's some of the best, most aggressive acoustic guitar sounds I've ever heard in my life. But there's also some amazing production that just comes. I think of it as these very long, almost folk songs, but they're not. But they have these islands of production where a full orchestra comes in, but only for 45 seconds and then disappears, and then vocal treatments and things. And so the mixes on those must have been incredibly complicated.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it was only 8-track, of course, but, you know, they would take a day or two, I suppose.
Right.
South Africa's a great track which was done. Phil McDonald did a lot of the engineering and mixed South Africa. Me and My Woman, I'm trying to think of another version. There's another section, I can't remember what song it's on, one of the other songs, and there's a mistake on the guitar, and it's only guitar and voice. And there's a mistake on the guitar, and Roy spent ages trying to patch it up. And he said, well, just take the guitar out. It's like, you can't just take the guitar out. And there's this nice little fade where the guitar fades down and you're just left with the voice on its own. And then it fades back up again and everyone goes, wow, that's beautiful.
But it's because there was a mistake.
It was to cover up a mistake.
Oh, that's amazing. Because it's an amazing moment, but it does come at a very weird time. Like, it's not set up by anything. It's sort of in the middle of something, but it's great. But that's amazing.
But Roy would have a lot of those things because it was edited and a lot of work and dropping in and stuff. And so you would create mistakes and go with them and create something beyond the mistake as well, you know.
Right. So the other one for me from that era is Pink Floyd's Metal, and I know you did a lot of work on Echoes, which is side B. That's the 20-minute side B. Which I definitely want to hear about. But before that, I just want to know if there's anything you can tell me about Fearless, because that is, I think, one of the best things ever done. That song is...
Yeah, I wasn't there when that was...
No,
recorded.
okay.
I can't tell you that. Another one, Saint-Tropez. Saint-Tropez as well was I wasn't there. I don't know quite where Fearless was done. It could have been done at Morgan Studios, which is where it was mixed. But I don't remember working on that when the record came out. I thought, oh, they must have recorded another song. And the same with Saint-Tropez, which kind of sounds like an older song.
Yeah.
They'd had on the shelf somewhere, you know. So I just worked on Echoes, and one of these days cut you into little pieces.
Yeah.
Can't remember what else. Oh, and Seamus the dog, which is crazy. Oh, that's on there, isn't it? Yeah, with the creaking chair on the porch. Yeah. I can't remember what else, but no, Fearless and you know, in Liverpool, you've been to Liverpool. You must have been to Liverpool. Everyone plays Fearless in Liverpool. that on the
Really?
guitar. Yeah, the Lars used to do it. I think the Lars.
Is it well? Is it their? Is that their football chant at the end? Because I'm not familiar. So
That's right. That's
okay,
what. Yes, correct. Yeah.
yeah, we will meet again, or no.
You never
Anyway,
walk alone.
yes, never
You
walk
never
alone.
walk alone. It's the
Yeah,
it's the opera.
yeah. All right. Well, so God, there's so much, but we could, if you want, sort of take the Pink Floyd and Syd Barrett thing, because Syd Barrett's a bit of an enigma. There's a story Ken Scott was talking about, because obviously Syd was making his the first couple solo albums while he was there, and he had a session booked with Syd, and Syd just never even showed up, like he never even met him, kind of thing. And so I think towards the end, that's sort of what everybody was, their experience with Syd. But I'm curious, because you were there sort of the tail end of Syd as well, right? The transition in the band, and just, I don't know. I mean, Pink Floyd's seminal stuff, and you were there. So if there's anything at all you feel like talking about with them.
Yeah, well, I wasn't there when Syd was in the band. I actually didn't. I can't remember. I probably first met the Pink Floyd, although I'd seen them a number of times before, like live and stuff. But I'm just trying to think. Two incidences in those early days was working with Syd on the what would be the second solo album, which is called Barrett, with the bees on the front.
Yeah.
And it was Roger and Dave really producing, trying to get something from Syd, something to, a complete song that they could work with, and they tried with a drummer. To be honest, I don't remember much about it. It was probably just a few days midweek. There was a sort of unnerving kind of atmosphere of what's going on and what's happening, and of course from the musicians as well.
Right.
And but my other meeting with the Floyd actually was Atom Heart Mother in Hyde Park.
Right.
Pre-concert, and they performed Atom Heart Mother with the choir and the horns, like the brass section, and Friday afternoon at Abbey Road, word went round that they wanted someone to collect 24 chairs and music stands to be taken to Hyde Park for 9 o'clock tomorrow morning for the free concert, and collected at 6 o'clock. I'll do that.
Yeah.
I'll be there. So I got the 24 chairs, and me and the van driver, and was there the whole time. It was fantastic.
Wow.
Anyway, they went back, and I just stayed there the whole time. And because I was backstage and everything, and Roy was there, so Roy's always been quite close, and Peter Jenner, of course. So
yeah,
all the records that I kind of did at Abbey Road as a tape op and took over as engineer was kind of Pete Jenner producing, and Edgar Broughton Band and Kevin Ayers and the Roy Harper and the Floyd were always in the other studio. So, you didn't have dinner with them. I mean, there was no food at Abbey Road. It was crazy all those years. They did lunch for the staff, but at 5:30, you wouldn't get a cup of tea unless you bought your own kettle, and your own milk thing, I don't think there was even water, and if you wanted a glass of water for the singer, you go to the tap in the in the bathroom, in the gents kind of thing, a glass of water for the singer.
Right, and it's a very residential neighborhood too. It's not like there's a Nando's around the corner. There's nothing going on.
There was the Heroes of Alma. There was a pub around the corner.
Right.
Yeah.
That's fine, because now it's one of my favorite places to eat lunch. I got to say, the food's pretty good there. On the many times I've been able to go and have lunch, I enjoy it. Yeah,
that's right. Yeah.
It's not too bad.
Standard now. Yeah.
So, I think we should move into sort of your production career. We're skipping over the fact that you went from tape op to engineer pretty quickly and established yourself there.
Well, it's a terrible period because it takes like 2 or 3 years, really. I mean, I was at Abbey Road 8 years, and although I engineered within the first sort of 4, 5, 6 months or something, I then spent the next 4 years being paid as a tape op and being known as a tape op, but doing lots of engineering sessions. Anything I could engineer, I would grab onto.
Right.
And I was lucky at the time because there was a lot of Harvest underground bands recording there,
Right.
and you at the same time, although you might be staying up all night with Roy Harper or Pink Floyd doing stuff and putting the voice through the Leslie and phasing it and things, at 9 o'clock you might have to be in on a classical session or a middle of the road session or something. Sometimes they'd do like Ken Dodd and Benny Hill sessions. They would do a vocal every year. Whoever won the Miss World contest would come in the following morning and do a pop single, to do a record quick, get it out, signed to EMI in Abbey Road, do a single. The morning after she's won Miss World,
Right.
every year that would happen.
And were all the young boys who were tape ops fighting over that gig?
No.
Uh,
Yeah, I can't remember that is true. Actually, I did do that.
it's
And Pinky and Perky, people always laugh when I say I worked on Pinky and Perky records.
wow.
Which was basically you do 4 songs in the morning with an orchestra, with a band, or whatever the band is, with maybe brass and conga and even a little strings quartet or whatever the music was. And then in the afternoon, these two old guys, however old they were probably 40, would come in and you'd play the tape. You play the tape at 7.5, and they would sing. And then when you played it back, it was Pinky and Perky, and they sold millions.
God, yeah, the UK version of the Chipmunks, basically.
That was it. Yeah.
Ah, so funny. Now, were there any classical sessions that you remember because you had the background in electronic music, so there must have been some of those sessions you were actually pretty into, I'd imagine.
Yeah. I did. I've been trying to find out. I did some. Well, I was the tape op, and Alan Parsons was the engineer, and this would have been 1972 or 73, and it was booked in as Stockhausen, but actually it was Stockhausen's students performing a piece by Stockhausen.
Right.
And they had two. I don't remember much about it. It was a weekend. It was like a Saturday and a Sunday, and they started late. They turned up late, and no one spoke English, or one of them spoke English very badly. And they had all this gear. I can't really remember much about it, but Luciano Berio,
Yeah.
you heard of him? He did a record that was in quadraphonic, and every time I heard that Steely Dan song about Kathy Barbarian, even Kathy Barbarian knows, they mention her. And she sang she was married to Berio, and she sang the voice, and he wrote the score for
Oh,
her.
wow.
And me and Peter Mew was a balance engineer, mixed it in quadraphonic. They had the Room 4 at Abbey Road was a 4-speaker quadraphonic thing. You mix down to 1-inch 4-track discrete, and then what's called SQ encoded, which was a CBS, which of course the MI hated the idea that they had to release their records with SQ encoded, and they could only be played through a Columbia CBS thing, decoder that split it into the 4 channels. It didn't last 5 minutes, but loads of records were done. Like even Tubular Bells and stuff was SQ encoded, and I even mixed Roy Harper SQ encoded. Everything had to be mixed in quadraphonic.
Right.
Anyway, Berio came in. They'd recorded this opera in Studio One, and Kathy Barbarian was singing. And of course, it's real crazy, staccato, dissonant kind of thing that was chirping out in different speakers. And me and Pete Mew did it with the classical producer. I don't know his name, but he wasn't really interested in what we were doing or anything. And Kathy Barbarian came, and we started the tape. And after 10 minutes, she suddenly burst into tears and was rolling on the floor, was crying. She was so overcome with
Wow.
this quadraphonic effect that things were coming from behind her. She was totally freaked out by it. and Berio had to take her out and talk to her in the corridor, and then Steely Dan came out with this song called Even Kathy Barbarian knows. I'm fucking hell, that's Kathy Barbarian. I just worked with her, you know.
Wow. Amazing.
Yeah.
Okay. Just in the interests of whatever, let's get to you start producing. So the first thing is, if I've got this right, the first thing that you co-produced was a Bebop Deluxe record.
Right.
And so, but that was also kind of the beginning of the end for you working at Abbey Road, right? Because wasn't that when you were trying to follow projects around and being told, like, well, you can't go work there and you got to do this? And
Yeah, that's right. Although when I first produced with Bebop Deluxe, was taken on as a producer and had a contract kind of thing. I was employed and credited and everything. Was 1975, so I continued to work at Abbey Road for 3 years,
right.
even though I was producing and bringing acts into Abbey Road, independent acts, because I could only work at Abbey Road. So like I did the adverts and XTC, and they would come into Abbey Road, but Bebop Deluxe were on EMI, so I could work in any other studio. We could go off to Air or the Manor. We could go for 6 weeks at the Manor because it was an EMI artist, you see. So that was the kind of score. They just couldn't contemplate the idea of me doing a band that wasn't connected with EMI.
Right.
Non-EMI studio. And I did XTC at the Manor in secret, like during my 2 weeks annual holiday, my annual leave, you know, I went off to the Manor and did white music with XTC. And then they opened the Townhouse and they wanted XTC to do the second album there just 6 months later, you know, do 2 albums a year, really. And so I go to Abbey Road and say, hey, they want me to, this band that I'd been in, and, you know, we'd already done 2 albums, you know, at Abbey Road. And they want me to go to this new studio. And they said, well, you can't go, you know, it's impossible, you'll be fired. And it was crazy. And the week I left, and I went to see people, and I'd already been offered a transfer to Capitol to run, to be an A&R department. It's in 1977 with a guy called John Carter, and Rupert Perry, of course, was running Capitol at that time. And I've still got the letter, actually, from Rupert Perry offering me a job in the A&R department at Capitol Records in Hollywood. You know, I'd never been to America before, for fuck's sake. I'd never been there. You know, it was like, whoa, I can't. So I went over there and, you know, was wined and dined by Capitol and then turned them down. And, you know, I settled in England. The music was just so different compared to what was happening in 1977, I think, was a whole different thing to compare with what was going on in LA, you know.
Yeah.
The only bands in LA really were X. We went to see X, and everyone was like, oh man, you got to see X, you know, they're really punk rock. And you go there and the guy's smiling, you know, what's his name? Billy, one of the guitarist guys.
Right.
Everyone's like healthy and suntan, and it was nothing like what was going on in London, you know, especially if you've never been to California before. You know?
Yeah. Well, all right. Look, we can't just skip over XTC like that, though. We got to talk about XTC. They were my favorite band for many years, and I love those 2 records. I mean, obviously, anything you want to talk about, but one of the things I was wondering is, obviously, Andy Partridge, certainly from album 4 or 5, had an unbelievably strong vision, production-wise, for the records. And then when he put out a whole box set of his...
From the beginning.
So from the very beginning. I was curious about that.
Beginning, from when I first met him, yeah.
Because it's, I mean, obviously the demos he did at home, once he set up his little studio at the end of the garden, as he calls them, things, were all, you hear so much of the production is already in there. And I was just curious at the very beginning, because they're almost a punk band at the beginning. It's not the sort of produced pop angular thing quite yet. It's a bit rawer than that. But so please, I'm going to shut up now, and you're going to talk about XTC.
You're talking about the first two albums, because XTC have got a big, long history.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
I only worked on the first two albums,
Yep.
which I think was, well, I did the 3D EP, which was called Science Friction, the 3D
Right,
EP,
right.
which was the first thing at Abbey Road. And then White
What
Music,
music,
which
and then
was
go
loads
to.
of tracks, not just what's on the album, because you do B-sides and you go, oh, I remember that one. And in fact, instead of doing 12, because all the songs are 2 minutes, so you got to do 14 to fit them on a record or something. We probably did 20 or maybe even 22 songs in 2 weeks at the Manor. And Andy was very much not domineering, because the whole thing was just mishmash, really, what was going on, but very, very creative, and talking about sounds and fussiness of sounds, pushing it, and but not in a intellectual kind of way, in a very sort of, and you laugh so much. The thing, whenever you're in the presence of Andy Partridge, particularly if it's Andy Partridge and Chambers or the whole band, how we used to get on. You go to bed with stomach ache, and you realise that your jaws are aching from laughing so much. No, they're very witty, a lot of fun. And in fact, I spoke to Terry Chambers. I should put word out, actually, that Terry Chambers, who was the drummer of XTC up until when when they stopped playing live, he's on all those early records. He's desperate to play with anyone,
Really?
XTC's drummer. Terry is in Swindon. He's rehearsing, playing every day, learning all sorts of new things. And he's desperate to play. Yeah, he's come back to Swindon after 32 years or 36 years in Australia.
Wow. Amazing. Well, that should, someone ought to take him up on that.
Yeah, definitely.
Maybe, yeah, not Andy probably at this point, but anyone else.
Yeah, but no, XTC, great fun all the time, and really, what can I say? Just full of overflowing with ideas,
Right.
musical ideas or tone ideas or something,
And was it really the whole band? It's not just Andy. I mean, obviously, and he's main songwriter and things, but everybody was involved, right?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. 100%. Yeah. Colin as well. Colin Moulding. They're all their own characters, and Barry Andrews. The two records I did at XTC had Barry Andrews on keyboard. So there was a intentional kind of clash between the keyboards and the guitar. Who could be loudest and brightest. And they're both going clang, 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 clang kind of thing together. And he had a piano, I think it was it was called the Lawrence. And it was this mini, proper strung piano. It was called the Lawrence, but it wasn't a toy. I've never seen one like it before. It was an upright piano. Strung and everything, and they'd hump it around and everything and throw it in the van, and it was a little bit honky tonk out of tune. But he had this treble booster, and it had a pickup in it, and he used to plug the treble booster in and then plug it in the amp. And when he hit it, it was like hitting a Telecaster with with the treble front, jing jing, and it was ding 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 ding. And it was fantastic, and it was an acoustic instrument. It wasn't electric.
Yeah,
and then he had the Krumar organ, which he had the top off. So all the electronics, there was no top on it. It was all like dust and beer and spit in there and everything. Because all the bands would go. I mean, in England, the punk thing, the audience would just gob at everyone, spitting and everything. So all their gear was always stained, rusty cymbals, and things. But the organ just had all sorts of dust and rubbish and old crisps sort of in this organ. And then when they played the BBC, they did the old grey whistle test.
Yes.
And the technician said, that's a fire risk. You can't play that. We've got to have that checked. And they actually built for him at the BBC a plastic cover, like a Perspex cover that went over the top. And when you see him on old grey whistle test, it's like, what's he done to the organ? He's got this cover on the organ.
Did he keep it?
Yeah, he still kept it.
Yeah.
And then on the back of the Lawrence, he spray painted dog breath. dog breath is spray painted on the back of the upright piano. Yeah.
Ah.
Barry Andrews, absolute talent, absolute. But with Andy Partridge, with the two of them, it's kind of one in each speaker. It was ping pong.
Yeah, and the arrangements are really, really clever because one of them, I mean, they are competing in ways, but one of them is holding down the fort so the other one can go way off-piste. Yeah, and it switches and changes, and it's really great. So now you said before you're not a musician, didn't grow up with musicians, but you're producing, and obviously we're going to get into the rest of the list. You're very prolific, but also ambitious bands musically. And obviously, if they're good like XTC and Radiohead, they're coming to the table with a lot of their ideas. But, and we'll get to this later too. I think I remember you talking about the I think it was the first Verve record, where live, these are all incredibly long songs, and you've got to get them down to manageable things. So you must have had input into arrangement and things like that. And so how was that, not being a musician, sort of learning to talk about music to bands on the fly in a way? And is that kind of, how do you do that?
I don't know. I don't know what I can say about that. It's probably experience. It's probably spending most of your life, or at that moment, the previous 15 years, you spent in the room with four people discussing those ideas. And so you kind of have solutions, and you know what's going to work, and you don't always know what people's capabilities are, like the drummer's capability, or with suggestions, and by capabilities I mean the capability to be simple. I don't mean like how fast or how clever you can be, but you got to be capable in a band, and in making a record you got to be capable of being simple, and that's obviously for a lot of people is very difficult because they're always trying to prove themselves and things. So you have to I don't know how you do it. It's just experience and knowing. When you were going
to gigs and listening to records and things, did you, before you sort of thought about working in a studio, did you already think of like, oh, I wonder if this could be different in any way? Were you ever thinking about records in that way before you started making them, or you just accepted what you heard? You were, yeah.
Well, yeah. How to make it better? How to make it more pleasing to me, acceptable? More. Right. More whatever the emotion is coming from it, more sensitive, more light, or more heavy, more tough, and those kind of things, So I'd always be in my head thinking it's like film editing or a film script or something.
Right.
It's like we go into another room. Here's the middle eight. You're in a different scenario, a different place. And then you come back to the feeling for the chorus.
Right.
And it's also about illusion as well. You don't want to give the game away. You don't want anyone to see how it's done, And very often with sounds and things, you can get, I don't know, a guitar that's there just for the playing. I'm just talking, arbitrary, really. Yeah. A guitar that's there for the playing, but isn't really, and it's distracting in as much as that it makes everything else sound artificial, because it's not meant to be there. If you see, it spoils the illusion,
Right.
So very often, and that, that can be a tonal thing. I'm not talking about EQ. I'm talking about tonality of guitar or the wrong instrument. Instead of a flute, it should be an oboe or something.
Right. Right. It seems as though that, like, you naturally have always had that ability to kind of hear what it is, because I think there are a lot of people can say, well, that's not great, but to immediately sort of go to what the crux of the problem is, that's the sign of a great producer. And it sounds like that's something you naturally did even before you knew what the words were for what those things were.
Yeah, maybe. I don't know. I just do what comes natural, what's natural to me or natural to my relationship with the artist or the guy that's performing. You might have to, I mean, we've all been there. You might have to, for instance, do a drop-in with someone who's not quite there or knows what dropping in is, where you play along and you drop in, you carry on and you don't stop. Very often they drop in, and because they can hear themselves or they can hear a glitch or something, they stop playing. and you have to explain it to them and those kind of things. So you have to get through all those problems, and also it's time management as well. Is what's going to take time with people coming up with suggestions which are going to take a day or a week or something
Right.
to get through, or great suggestions that could be done very really quickly, and moving like that. It's just I don't know. There's no. You've heard it before. There's no rules really.
No,
And you have to
no.
be so in the moment every. That's why it's such a great job to be a producer, because you can every song you do is different. Every part of every song, every overdub is different.
Yeah. Yeah.
What it creates. Sometimes you regret doing the first overdub. If you have a band playing. Two guitars, bass and drums, and maybe keyboards and a guide vocal, and it sounds fucking fantastic.
Yeah.
And then you do the overdub, and immediately you kind of, it's not as good now. Why is that?
Right. And sometimes it's because it needs the other 70 overdubs to be the other thing, and sometimes, it doesn't want anything.
Yeah. So you kind of learn that. That's time management. It's like, how long is this going to take?
Right. Do you find yourself being more creative as a producer because so many things can be done more quickly now? I mean, because something that would have taken a week for editing, now you can do in an hour at the most in Pro Tools or something like that. So are you trying more stuff, or are you still just reacting to what you think is going to work?
Trying more stuff. I'd be. Pro Tools offers so many time-consuming other possibilities. Editing drums, and if you start working on the grid, editing drums, moving things backwards and forwards, and that kind of thing. Yeah, I hate all that. But at the same time, I love it when I do it. It sounds better, moving that tom fill or something.
Well, or cutting together that Roy Harper track, while the orchestra's waiting. It would have been like, oh yeah, give me a second, go get a cup of tea and you'd be done, because you're not chopping 8-track tape things. So,
well, you still do. You still learn to chop 8-track 2-inch tape quickly.
Yes.
While the band's waiting.
Yeah. So, I'm trying to think let's continue in the XTC thing for a second, because you also worked on the Dukes of Stratosphere, which I absolutely love. And I'm sure I could go online and read what some people say about it, but I'm curious sort of what was the take? Was that XTC material that just wouldn't work for XTC, or was this, like, what was the genesis of that project?
I think Andy had the songs. They had this, even Colin had whatever his songs. They had a collection of songs that over the years, you could say, over a 10-year period, I suppose. When did we do it? 85? No, it wouldn't be a 10-year period. It's only things go much quicker. No, there were songs that were written that would XTC would never do, but they were just ideas. Some were complete and demoed. I never heard any demos. It's funny because since they've re-released it and they've done the box set and everything, they put the demos on, and I'm saying to Andy, I don't remember hearing demos. You never played me any demos. And apparently there were demos that were done a year before. But Mole from the Ministry, which is a track called Mole from the Ministry, which is a kind of Sgt. Pepper Beatles kind of walrus, I'm the walrus grunt is. Andy actually made that up in the studio, with the piano, and in the afternoon he was fumbling with trying to find the chords. Dave came in and we cut the track, and by the end of the evening we'd done the whole thing with all the silly overdubs and the backing vocals and everything that was on there, really.
Wow.
But they work hard, you do loads and loads of work with XTC, really musical, move on. Sometimes but what they loved about Dukes of Stratosphere is that it didn't take a year to do,
Right.
I mean, the other albums, they've done Oranges and Lemons in LA and took their wives and families and babies over to Los Angeles to live for 3 or 4 months while they were making this record. Enormous expense. And got so bored. At first, the wives and the kids went home, and then they went home. They didn't even go to the mix, And in those days, of course, and the guy, I can't remember his name now, who produced it, is playing Andy the mixes down the telephone. Oh
Right.
yeah, so good, because that's the only way we could do it.
Yeah.
As opposed to sending it's before CDs really, sending a cassette in the post, or courier. Yeah, that was another big thing that happened as well, is courier a rough mix cassette from LA to London. That's expensive. One guy picks up the cassette and from the studio and gets on a plane and flies to London.
God.
Delivers the cassette for listening. Do you like the mix? No, can't hear the bass. Turn it up. The guy's just flown, Virgin Atlantic.
Right. Amazing.
Anyway.
All right. So how about Public Image Limited? Because that's kind of a left turn.
Yeah, that came about because when I left Abbey Road, I had I didn't have a manager actually, and I had never had a manager until about 10 years into my career. So I was totally on my own. I had a lawyer and I didn't really understand what he was saying, but I was totally on my own and made my own deals and got totally ripped off and whatever as a producer, because all I wanted to do was work, be in the studio every day, and just go from album record to record, and anywhere in the world, I'd go off and do things. And so I had this arrangement with Virgin that I could produce and I would engineer as well. And I actually engineered Wilko Johnson. Wilko Johnson had just left Dr. Feelgood and did Wilko Johnson's Solid Senders at the Manor. And so I did 2 weeks recording that. I don't think anyone went to bed for 2 weeks, that band. And I just finished the Wilko Johnson thing. I think it was on the Saturday night, and Richard Branson actually phoned me up, and Richard would be there sometimes at weekends. He'd turn up with his wife and stuff, and on the Friday night, and be gone on the Monday morning. So he would be there over the weekend. And he phoned me up and said that John had just left his band. You probably heard that John has just left his band, and he's got this new band, and they're really good, and they've got this great song, and we really want you to go in the studio Monday morning with them. And I'm like, John, what's he talking about? He's talking about Johnny Rotten and the Sex Pistols. The new band was Public Image. So I turned up at Advision, where I'd never worked before. I'd never worked at Advision Studios. And there was the band and there was the setup. I had no sleep. I'd been up for 2 weeks with Wilko Johnson, and Monday morning there I was, driven from Oxford to London to, centre of London, to do work in the studio I'd never been. And then the band showed up, and they all had new equipment. All the drums and the bass and everything still had labels on and stickers. They were unwrapping, taking the wrapper off them and stuff. And they just had this song. And they were. What can I say? They were difficult. They would do things to purposely be difficult. So Steve Levine decided that he was going to be in control of it, and he was produce it, and don't mess about. They didn't know that I was producing it, that I was meant to be producing. I think when they first walked in, I assumed they'd said, and I said, I'm John Leckie, I'm the producer. And they just looked at me and said, fuck off. And that was it. And so Steve Levine wanted to put his amp, his Fender Twin, in the control room at the back by the door facing the mixer. It was only a little control room, and play in the control room with his amp. So he's like, can I play in here? I say, yeah, you can run a lead. No, I want the amp in here. I want the amp right there. Don't fuck about, all right? Don't fuck up. Who are you anyway? What's your name again? So it's kind of a bit like that. And then Wobble nicked my wallet, so we got our coats hanging up. And I'm sort of sitting at the mixing desk, and Wobble comes up with my wallet. He says, is this yours? And I'm going, yeah. Did I drop it? And he says, no, it's mine now, isn't it? Fuck off, And then at the end of the day, at the end of the night, I'd tap him on the shoulder as he's going. I say, Wobble, can I have my wallet back? Fuck off, no. No, I haven't got your wallet, and this kind of thing. So you'd have this big Barney and everything. So anyway, it was good fun. And they came back the next day and did some singing on the second day. And then they went up to Wessex and mixed it with Bill Price.
Right.
And it sounded just like my rough mix.
I'll
No,
bet it
really,
did.
I wish I'd kept the rough mix. I don't think there was a rough mix, actually. It was all on the 24 track.
Right. I also love that that whole story is about how difficult everybody was, and you didn't mention John at all. So he was
No,
obviously all right.
yeah. You're dead right. No, it was the others. It was Steve Levine and Wobble, really. And the drummer, Jim, was great. He's Canadian. He's really good. I'm sort of friends with him, really. He's the only guy. So I met Wobble and said, "Hey, do you remember me?" And he was like, "No." so, so I had to explain. And he said, "Well, it could have been. I have no recollection of that
Wow.
period."
And
Oh.
he still has your wallet somewhere.
But he believed me, he believed me. I had to tell him. And Jim knows as well, because I've been in correspondence with Jim, the drummer. And Steve Levine, I haven't seen. Steve Levine, of course, took the tape home. So after the first night, he's like, "What's happening to that? What are you doing?" I'm spooling the 24 track off. He said, "What are you doing with that?" I said, "Well, I'm just going to leave it here. It'll be all right. It'll be locked up." "No, fuck off. I'm taking it home. I'm having it." I'm going, no. You got to leave it here. It'll be okay. It'll be locked up. No one will take it. "No, fuck off. I'm taking it." I said, "Well, bring it back tomorrow then. Make sure you bring it back tomorrow, because if we do another song, we need a bit." So the next day he comes in. I said, "Have you got the tape?" "What tape? What tape?" "No, fuck off, mate. I haven't got it." "No, I gave it to you last night." "No, you didn't."
You're joking.
Yeah. So this would carry on for about 2 hours. And then finally, Johnny Rotten would say, "Steve, look, just fucking go home and get a taxi and get the tape, will you?" "Oh, all right then." So he purposely left the tape at home, So he had
Wow.
to get a taxi and go back to like wherever he lived in Wandsworth and come all the way back and into the city. And
And not for any reason, really. Just
no, just to wind it
being
up.
difficult.
Or he forgot,
Yeah, but wouldn't admit it.
He
Yeah.
didn't think it was needed,
Yeah, that tape in your wallet, never to be seen again.
So that was, and of course, every time you walked out of the control room to do something in the studio, you come back in, Wobble would have turned every knob on the mixing desk. Every knob in the mixing desk would be in a different position. All the faders would be up and down, You're like, what are you doing?
God, amazing. But
And well, listen to the record. We
yeah,
did it. We've done it,
yeah, another seminal
Even the
recording.
vocal, the hello, hello at the beginning is a sound check, is him doing testing, hello, hello.
Yeah,
And then I read the review and it said Johnny Rotten is saying hello to his audience. It's the new band, it's Image, Public Image, and hello, hello. What a great way to start. Hello, hello, to speaking to his public,
yeah,
Like, no, he was just testing the mic and the headphones.
yeah. Those are always the greatest things, though. All the little headphone check things. They're always
Yeah.
good. Always leave them in. So, all right, this is sort of same era, a little bit later, but there's kind of a group of bands more synth oriented, and more. I mean, I guess pop. I mean, it's still alternative at that point, but I mean, between Human League magazine and Simple Minds, we're spanning a bit more of a thing. But there's this whole other group of bands that's different, and I'm just curious, what your take was on it, how you ended up working with a couple of those bands, and just anything to talk about. And how did you treat them differently because it was so different musically, or every record you just go in, you've got a vision, or the band has a vision, and you go.
Yeah. Yeah, it all depends on the band and what the music is, and what you're trying to bring out the best of the music, whether it's best in the performance or the best in the tonality or the best arrangement, of suggesting arrangement changes, or depending on what your relationship is with the band and what their relationship with how precious they are with the music, and what they, like I said before, about their capabilities of wanting being able to change things and suggesting different drum beats and wondering whether the drummer can do it,
Right.
those kind of things. So yeah, the electronic bands at that period you're talking about, that was just the period in, in late 70s when I guess the electronic thing was happening, wasn't it? It was,
Yeah.
Drum machines. I did the record with Magazine where the drummer didn't sound like a drum machine. it
Yeah.
was it was a drummer that played, that was still pretty good and tonality and things. But after that, everyone aspired to the drummer playing to a click, and sounding like a drum machine. Every hit is the same tone and all that kind of thing. It's totally inorganic rhythm sound with the bass as well. Really. So yeah, a lot of people were were doing that, and Magazine was a different thing. It was more musical, but again, it was much more synth. Dave Formula. It was keyboards. There was this Ultravox all happening. And then Simple Minds. Simple Minds. They sent me a demo. The record company sent me a demo. Actually, I got the Simple Minds job because they were fans of a band called the Doctors of Madness, Richard Strange and the Doctors of Madness, and I did a record with them. It's called Figments of Emancipation. And, we did at Abbey Road 3, and it was on Polydor when the Jam was signed to Polydor.
Right.
The same I&R guy signed the Jam and the Doctors of Madness.
Wow.
And, Chris Parry was. And anyway, I did the second Doctors of Madness record, and Simple Minds were big fans. In fact, they hitchhiked from Glasgow to Newcastle. Hitchhiked to see the Doctors of Madness gig. And so when I went up to see, when they got signed as Simple Minds, and I went in the dressing room, they said, you are the John Leckie that did Doctors of Madness, aren't you? And I said, yeah, that's me. So that's how I got and then we ended up doing 3 albums together, Simple Minds.
Yeah.
We were kind of, brothers, and, although they were younger than me, they were looking for a sound, trying to explore different things. We did the first record, which, they demoed and everything. And that's how they got the deal. It's always like the first album, which is called Life in a Day. And they've got Chelsea Girl, some really great tracks on there. And it was just at that period of, I don't know, Roxy music, late Roxy kind of period. And also sequences and craft work and still, guitar, Lou Reed kind of guitar. And they hated when the record came out. I thought it was fantastic, and people today kind of go, "Wow, it sounds like it's recorded yesterday," and they hated it because they wanted it, I don't know, they wanted it rough and punk rock and has no edge, and you're kind of thinking, well, hang on, that's who you were at that time,
Yeah.
different. And people love it. Anyway, so the next record, they decided that they were going to write it in the studio. And the record company said, fine, get 5 weeks at Rockfield, So we went up to Rockfield. They had about 3 or 4 songs that they'd been playing live, but the other 6 or 8 songs they wanted to write in the studio. And of course, it could be anything, it was like we're coming in the morning and it's like find a bass riff or take a section of the drums, and we wouldn't play it backwards, but we would play it at a different speed, or something. And very often you'd run through songs and not purposely, but speed them up and then recut them at the faster speed, if you see what I mean. So using the vary speed on the tape. Of course, it's all those things that you might do on a computer now and things, or before you start. But it was just the way we went around it, of using different rhythms, taking things out, I remember there was a song called I Travel, and it used to be called 3 Beats because it went boom, 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 da 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 da, boom, 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 ding, 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 ding. And suddenly someone said, hey, why don't you just take that out? And so suddenly you had silence, boom, dun, 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 and silence. Which is much better because the voice could come in,
Right.
without the 3 beats, and it completely changed the whole thing. And that was just one of the things. So anyway, yes, we did that whole album called Real to Real Cacophony at Rockfield, recorded and mixed. And then the next album was called Empires and Dance, which was actually started at what is Mono Valley.
Yeah.
And at that time, Kingsley had bought it. So Charles, I think the story is that when Kingsley and Charles, this is at Rockfield Studios, when Kingsley and Charles's father died, Charles, being the elder brother, inherited Rockfield, the farm, the buildings. And so Kingsley cleared off, and there's some big argument. And Kingsley bought Mono Valley, which used to be, for English people, Lillian Skinner's social club. So Lillian Skinner's was a shoe shop that every town in England had a Lillian Skinner's shoe shop that sold, all it sold was shoes, men and ladies' shoes, Lillian Skinner's. And Mono Valley used to be their summer club where they would go and do fishing and, they're
Wow.
sort of hanging out for the executives. And Kingsley bought it really cheap. He come up and see this place. And of course, you had this big room that was great for rehearsal. There was no equipment or anything, and loads of other rooms. So I don't know what the accommodation is. There's 12 bedrooms, or maybe more.
Yeah, I mean 7 upstairs, most of them double, and then there's some attic rooms, and then there are a couple downstairs.
Yeah,
and
there's lots and lots of space. It was really rough when Kingsley took it over, but it was a bed and breakfast rehearsal room. So you would get a chef, a housekeeper in, and you could rehearse, make much noise day and night, up there in this big black room. And I recorded, I can't remember how we got there. They'd been rehearsing there. It was the place to go where you wouldn't get busted. No one would come around. No one would know where you were. There was no complaints or anything, and you could do what you like. And I think Simple Minds had been rehearsing there. So I went up there with the Rolling Stones mobile, and we started the album at Mono Valley with the Stones truck. And then we moved for one reason, being that the Skids were in Rockfield proper. So the Skids were in the Courtyard studio at Rockfield, and we couldn't get in there. So that's why we started. And then we went to Rockfield, and we were in one studio and the Skids was in another. And then what happened is the Skids left and Iggy Pop turned up. Iggy Pop turned up for 2 or 3 weeks. And David Bowie came, and he was doing a record which was I think it was called Party, or it might have been Soldier. Not quite certain. This was like 1978, I think.
Right.
Again, it might have been 79. It might have been... No, it might have been 1980, actually. Glenn Matlock was in the band, and Barry Andrews was playing with Iggy, and Glenn Matlock was playing with Iggy. And he had James Henderson from the original Stooges producing. And they had an American engineer, and for the first time ever, they were doing it 48 track. Wow. So they had 2 24 tracks synced together. And for some reason, the producer and the engineer's idea of recording 48 track was to record the live band on all 48 tracks. So instead of like recording them on 24 and then doing your backing vocals on the other 24, he wanted to record the whole band first, all the backing tracks. Yeah. So he had the first 24 track was the drums, really. Was like mics inside the toms, mic outside, 4 different ambient mics, all over the place. And all the guitars had, 6 microphones on, and they were all recorded on different tracks. So, and of course it kept dropping out and the machines would stop and not everything was happening, you can understand. And it was all very chaotic. And then David Bowie turned up. And David Bowie was all just one night, and Derek Forbes from Simple Minds comes running over and says, "Hey, Bowie's in the other studio. Come on, let's go." So they get over there, get blagged in for doing hand claps, singing backing vocals. They sang backing vocals with Bowie on the Iggy record.
Wow.
We had quite a night there, yeah. And then James Henderson got saying, is it? No, it's Williamson, isn't it? James Williamson, not Henderson, James Williamson. And he got so pissed off with Bowie being there and the whole thing being chaotic and the studio not working he went home. And so Arista phoned me up, and Iggy Pop was on Arista, Simple Minds were on Arista. It's the same label. And Charles Levison, the chairman guy, phones me up and says, "John, you know that James Williamson has left. We wondered if you could take over producing Iggy as well, and maybe you could do Iggy. Now Iggy gets up early in the morning, so maybe you could do him in the morning, do Jim in the morning, and then sort of in the afternoon after lunch or something, carry on with Simple Minds." And and then maybe when Simple Minds finish, if they can finish at 12, because Iggy can work anytime, you could do a few hours with Iggy at the end of the evening and carry on, working on both of them 24 hours, which I did for a few days. For about 3 days, I stayed up and did the mornings with Iggy, and Iggy would then Simple Minds day, and then at midnight, Iggy would just be finishing his dinner and say, "Come on, then let's do a couple of hours vocals."
Wow. It's
anyway,
the kind of thing where someone
memories.
asks you to do it, and it's a terrible idea, but you're not going to say no. Like, you've got to try and make that happen.
You've got to try it, yeah. Anyway.
God, good fun.
Yeah, that's true story.
Yeah. So there's this weird outlier when I'm looking at, the internet, who knows what's accurate and what's not. But there's an Ornette Coleman record listed in your discography. And
Skies of America.
Yeah. I would love to hear a little bit about that, because it's the only jazz record I can find in there.
Oh yeah. Okay. I love putting it in there anyway. I was a tape op. I wasn't the engineer.
All right, okay. But still.
And so he's with he's either with the LSO or the RSO, London Symphony, or the Royal Symphony. I think he's with the LSO, London Symphony, but it's in Studio 2, not in Studio 1. Tony Clark engineered it, and Ornette Coleman came in. He wasn't there the whole day, and I think he turned up about 5 o'clock, about half an hour before the end, in his black drape coat. He looks like an undertaker.
Yeah.
Black long coat. He looked fantastic, and came in with the sax and played along, because they were going to overdub it all, you see. And for some reason, he suddenly appeared and got his sax out and played live with the orchestra. But that wasn't in the intention, whether they used that or anything. But I've never heard the finished record, actually.
Really?
It was fantastic.
Wow.
Yeah.
Because such a talent. And it's not, obviously that's not his normal record with an orchestra.
No.
That,
No.
things. So,
No.
All right. So there's still, we were sort of, I guess we're reaching the interval, right? Then we've got the second half of the career. But I want to talk a little bit, if you don't mind. Otherwise, we can just skip over this. So the whole time, your whole life, you've been spiritual in different ways and into Eastern philosophy a bit. And you actually took some time off. And when I've heard you interviewed about it before, you almost make it sound like, it was sort of the natural progression of what was going on. But you were also crazy busy. It wasn't like, you're making 2 records a year, and if you took a couple years off, you're working all the time. You've talked about how you wanted to just be in the chair all the time. So if you don't mind, I'd love to know sort of what made you decide that was where you wanted to go, when you went from just wanting to do nothing 24 hours a day but sit in that chair making records, to realizing like, no, it's time to kind of go somewhere else, and then how that worked out and what brought you back out of it.
Mm-hmm. Well, let's see. Well, the period is, I guess, 1982, 81, 82. I'd been producing for I'd been in the studio for 12 years, and been producing for probably 5, 6, 7 years, I suppose. What brought me out of it? All different things. the pull of that, the pull of being part of the Rajneesh movement. So this is following. At the time, he was known as Bhagwan Sri Rajneesh, and it was a Rajneesh commune, a neo-sannyas commune, and he later became known as Osho. And most people now know him from Wild Wild Country, which is a program on Netflix. If anyone wants to check it out, how many episodes are there? 8 or something episodes. And it's the story of the commune that was happening at the time I was there. There were communes all around the world, and it was very much focused on Oregon. So they bought the organization bought a ranch in Oregon for which they got the rights to build a city. In state laws, I guess federal or state laws, you can incorporate a city if you have the right amount of money and if you have the right legal status and the land and everything's clear, and it's like, okay, you can now call yourself a city, like Culver City and in Los Angeles, there's different cities and things. It's an American thing. And anyway, so we did all that because most of the people in the organization were all at the prime of their life. I was 35, I suppose. Most people were between 25 and 45, even 25 and 40. There was not a lot of young people. There was not a lot of old people. So everyone had been successful and had chosen to follow you could say, the guru and be a part of the community. Whether it was, everyone had different reasons. And you could leave at any time and anyone could visit. There was no big secrecy thing. Anyone could come and observe and be there, and obviously if you're going to just come and observe, you're going to get pretty uncomfortable after a while, just people watching you and what you're doing, oh, I'm watching you, so, any time and anyone could leave at any time, but of course that gets more difficult as slowly all your friends are part of the organization and you have a deep relationship with it and you're living there and things. The commune, without going into it in a big way. So the commune is basically, yes, you live in the commune and the commune looks after you. So you don't have any money and you don't need any money. Although I had money, you can have money. If you want money, you can have money.
Right.
If you used to have a lot of money and now you haven't got any, that's all right as well. And if you never had money and you still haven't got any money, that's cool as well, because the money we don't need it. The commune will provide. So people came at it from different places. So some people had been in India, since the early 70s. So they'd been 12, 15 years in it. Some had grown up as children. Even there was kids, there was a schoolhouse and there was teachers teaching them. It was everything provided, and the Oregon thing was where the ranch was, where the city was. And I went there 3 times in the summer periods, in festival periods. I could have gone there for 3 months, 6 months. You can just go, you move around and it's a big thing. Why did I do it? I can't say why I did things. They came up. It just came up. But in terms of the studio thing, it really changed, I guess, in that early part of the 80s, where I'd been making records for 10 years professionally in the studio, earning my living from making records. And then suddenly 2 words, there may be 3 words, 2 words. First word is MIDI. And the second word is SSL. And what would the third word be? Try and think what the third word would be, which changed me. Click track, maybe.
Right.
That go with MIDI. Yeah. Although I don't think they used to play along to click track so much, but even in the it would be click track, wouldn't it? But that goes with MIDI. Yeah, MIDI and SSL. So you couldn't mix unless you were on SSL, and very often you didn't have the budget for SSL, and everyone would blame it if it wasn't a hit or the band couldn't take off. The manager would blame it on the fact that John Leckie didn't mix it on an SSL. And why didn't you tell us that you had to mix it on an SSL to have a hit? You never told us this. And those kind of things. And
Right.
and then getting on an SSL and kind of going, oh, this is a bit of shit. It's not Neve, is it? It's not Rack, and it's not, it's not like Air Studios or what you're used to. It's a lot better than a TG, but it's not. It's not like working on a 1073 and a Neve Air or something. It's not got the beef or the fatness or the crispness, and the high end thing. It was a bit like a PA desk, really. When you first went on that SSL in Townhouse, in Townhouse 2, it was like a PA desk. I'm going, this is like a Midas, because Roy Harper used to have a Midas, which was a big multi. I did a whole record on it with studio tape machines, but the desk, and it was all recorded and monitored through this Midas. It's called Bull in a Ming Vase. It's called Bull in a Ming Vase on Harvest. One of These Days in England is the long song. And it was recorded at Roy's farm in Hereford, the Vauld. And he had a Midas desk. And as soon as I got on the SSL, I thought, fuck, the Midas is even, this is worse than the Midas.
Yeah, Midas are pretty good sounding analog desks, really.
Yeah. Yeah, and the parametric, the parametric and the way you can do things with it. And it was kind of bulky kind of thing that Roy had. Anyway, so I suppose my attitude, maybe I wasn't getting enough work or things.
So it wasn't necessarily, it wasn't like a reaction to the work, but you didn't mind missing what was going on kind of thing, and you were heading that way.
I didn't mind missing the music. The MIDI, certainly didn't mind missing the MIDI or everyone had a DX7,
right.
Or the drum machine, and no one could decide the tempo, let's do it all again and one beat faster,
Right. So then what brought you back out? Was there a specific project and then that kind of kickstarted things, or did you just drift back into it?
Various things happen. Well, if you've seen the Netflix, the Wild Wild Country thing, all that happened, and it didn't slowly fizzle out because it's still going. It's still going strong. Not strong, but it's still going. Things have changed. Relationships have changed. By this time, it was, I suppose, 84, 85, and
right.
My first work actually was The Fall, and when I was in the commune, we all had these little post boxes. And in this post box one morning was this envelope with a cassette from Beggar's Banquet. It was The Fall. And I thought, I've heard of them. They've been going since 77, haven't they?
Yeah.
So it was 8 years after that. And so immediately when I left, I was still wearing red clothes. So this part of this, being part of this commune is that you wore all red clothes. Different shades of red, any color, but it was red, and it was great. I mean, it was red underpants, red sheets on your bed, and all that kind. And you had what's called a mala, which is 108 beads made of rosewood with a rosewood medallion, I suppose, with a picture of Osho on there. And you always wore that, and it was very cool, and no one ever asked you about it or anything. And in fact, I wore it with the Fall and Dukes of Stratosphere, were first Dukes of Stratosphere.
Right.
Record. And no one asked me why I'm wearing this string of beads with this picture of this Indian guy around my neck all the time, every day. Why am I wearing it? No one asked me.
Wow. Well,
he used to get in hysterics about it. It's like, why? And I went to a party with Brits and Mark to Genesis Peorage, Psychic TV, this party down in London. And my wife was there, and the two of us were in red with malas on, with the beads on. and Mark was great. Mark had no qualms about it at all. And Brits would go, oh, you two are so cool, look at you two.
Right.
and of course, everyone else was weird and freaky punky,
Right.
Next question.
Well, yeah. So The Fall. I mean, we can talk about them for a bit because they've been around forever. They made tons and tons of records. You did how many with them? Three. Three. Yeah.
I did about 45 songs with them.
Yeah, exactly. And it's chaotic stuff, but really cool. And let's talk about them for a minute because they don't get a lot of. They didn't get much traction in the States, certainly. I mean, you know, if you were cool and hung out in indie record stores, you would have heard of them, but it wasn't really a thing for
on
me.
The radios, no radio play, really.
Yeah, yeah, but a super cool band.
Oh yeah, beyond cool. No, well, Mark, it was all down to Mark. You know, they said that if it was your granny playing bongos and Mark was in it, it would still be The Fall. You know,
right?
That's one of the things they say. But no, I mean, it was what could you say? A disciplined band, a crazy band. I mean, when I worked with them, there was two drummers. You know, there was Carl Burns and Paul Hanley, two brothers. So Steve Hanley's the bass player. So we had two drummers, two guitarists, bass, and whatever Mark wanted to do. But no, the bass and drums were always really solid. Craig Britz is really solid as well. I mean, she can play. She's fantastic on, you know, guitar and tone and what she does. You know, with her new band, Britz and the Extricated, you know. And Craig, the other guitarist, would always have some weird pedal that you'd never seen before, or he'd be playing through some Truvox amp or something, like some weird contraption that he'd had, and he was obviously adept at a soldering iron. You know, his guitars, you could tell he'd take them apart and puts them back together again in the next day. You know, but no, he was the band were great. But they would just do tracks if songs weren't working in the studio. You just do another song. If you got to take three and it wasn't happening. Fuck that. We just do another one, you know, just do something else. And sometimes the band wouldn't have heard it at all, you know. They'd kind of play that riff you were playing the other day, you know, and they would play it, and they would join in, and Mark would go, and you're getting this, and get it down, and that would be it. And he'd come in and give you a piece of paper and go, that's what it's called. That's what it's called. You go, oh, okay. So you end up collecting all these things and make up intro. And again, edits and things, you know, sometimes they'd play for until the tape run out. You know, sometimes they'd play for 12 minutes. And you're like, you can't have that. You can't have 12 minutes. It just goes on. That bit there is really boring. There's like at least 6 minutes of boredom in the middle of that. And Mark would go, you know, and I'd say that. Oh, really? Well, do something about it. You're the fucking producer. And I'd say, oh, okay. So I just cut the middle 6 minutes out, you know, and leave 6 minutes.
That's brilliant.
You know, yeah, that's all right.
And did Mark always...
to do 3 albums, you have to have some sort of relationship.
Yeah. And did he always have a plan? Did he always have a plan for the song? Or so his part was just... But a lot of it was sort of in the moment or could change.
Absolutely, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, he'd always have lyrics on scraps of paper in a bag kind of thing. He wouldn't have a book or anything like that, and he certainly wouldn't have a phone. I mean, even now, you know, he's totally unlike that. He wouldn't make lyrics up. He'd always write them down before and read them or something. Often he'd record stuff on his cassette and play that.
Right.
But they would be something different. So last night before he went to sleep, he'd sort of wrap something into his cassette player, and that would be the vocal. And then he'd come in singing for the chorus kind of thing. And
right.
And you'd hear, as he's singing the chorus, he's spooling the cassette player for the next verse. You know. But he was great, really good fun.
And I'd imagine, I mean, were those records made pretty quickly, just moving the whole time, or? Yeah,
but in different places. The first record, which I think the one that I did called Wonderful and Frightening World of, was recorded in what was called Focus Studio, which is, I think, in Elephant and Castle. And it closed down I think we were one of the last sessions in there, and Stock Aitken Waterman Stock Aitken and Waterman bought the studio, the whole building.
Oh,
And it was
right.
like a mini Studio 2. It was all wood with a control room and the stairs going up. It was like Studio 2 Abbey Road, but it was kind of smaller, but still quite large with a wooden floor. And it was great because we had 2 drummers set up and the band are really loud. I mean, everything's cranked up. And then the next one, we went to Music Works, which isn't there anymore, in Holloway Road, and which was, and then the third one was done in Manchester. Actually, was done up at Square One in Manchester, and different other places. Can't quite remember much about that. By the time we got to the third one, it was all like patchy, which is called Ben Sinister. You know, a lot of people like that one.
Yeah.
Ben Sinister. That's the one with Mr. Pharmacist. Oh yeah, Mr. Pharmacist. There's a story for Ben Sinister. Is Mark? We got to a stage where we got the Simon Rogers was the keyboard player. So he got this keyboard player in who joined the band, who was more of a musician and was, what could I say, a little bit more mature musician than the others, and he'd have all these ideas. So we'd do these tracks and he'd get to put on keyboard parts and you'll do the mix. You've been all day mixing this track and it's like, you know, it's gone midnight and you play it back to Mark and you go, and everyone's like, oh yeah, man, that sounds great. It sounds great. And he goes, what the fuck? I said, well, you're fucking about it. Turn all the keyboards off now. He says, that's not going on the record with any keyboards. Turn them all off now. And it's like, hang on, we spent a day or so doing all the keyboards. Everyone's been jumping up and down. We've mixed it all day and everyone's raving over it. And now you don't want to hear them, you know. It's like, turn them all off. And so you do. And then and that becomes the record. And then I realized, I said, look, Mark, what you actually want to hear from the song, from the recording, is what you heard when you did the backing track and you came for a listen. So he'd be down there doing the backing track with the guitar, bass, drums, doing a guide vocal or lead vocal. And he'd come and listen to it and go, yep, that's it. And to him, no matter what you did what you put on it or overdubbed or changed the mix, it would never be as good as that moment when he heard it when he first came up. So I said, look, we don't need a multi-track. Let's just record straight stereo. Let's go somewhere really good and do 3-4 songs a day, right? We do 2 in the afternoon and 2 in the evening. No mixing, do the vocals. That's it. They're all done in one day. And we go to Abbey Road. Okay, so we went to there and we did Mr. Pharmacist, British Grenadier. It's called 3 tracks on in one day on that end up on Ben Sinister. And there's no multi-track. It was just done onto, well, unfortunately, it was going at 30. It should have been going at 15. Was it? Yeah, it would have been a half inch. It wasn't quarter inch. Yeah.
Right.
So that's the only version of that. So no one can turn the vocal up or bass drum or anything that would start overdubbing keyboards, you know.
And were you always engineering while you were producing, or did you have engineers sometimes?
Most of the time, in the early days, I would do it all myself. I would, be a one-man show. I would do it all myself.
And did you prefer to do it that way, or that's just what was happening?
Yeah. It took me a long time to get out of that. I really wanted to. I knew I had to get out of that. I think if you speak to anyone like Steve Lillywhite and people on Hugh Padgett and stuff, you know, the urge to reach over and do things because you know you can do them a lot quicker, you know, set up a headphone mix or, you know, I'm not talking about plugging in reverbs and different stuff, but engineering things, chores, or even, you know, getting a level on a mic. You're going to do a vocal and you're getting a level and you're going through an 1176 or something and getting that happening because the guy wants to sing now and you want to get the first take, you know. So yes, it took me a long time, but those early ones, I suppose it wasn't until 90s really that I was letting other people do it.
Right.
Someone else touched the desk.
Well, let's talk about some of these 90s records then. I think just we could talk about them individually because they're obviously huge records. I mean, the Stone Roses, Verve, Ride, even Spiritualized. There's this genre of, I don't know how to describe it. I was trying to think in my head today of how to describe it. It's kind of like the jangly shoegazer UK 90s thing. And you were involved in every single important record at the beginning of almost every one of those bands' careers. And it's so you don't have, I don't think you have a sound as a producer at all. You really go with what the bands are and things like that. But you had a run with those bands. And is that because there were just a bunch of bands that happened to be kind of in that genre? And obviously those bands are very individual within the genre, but they are that big, spacey, jangly thing. But rather than being just noise, there are really, really good songs and great melodies within that. And you did a ton of them. So, I mean, Stone Roses Over Here is like, that's the God record. In a way that I think maybe the Pixies are a bit more in the States and things like that. But so we could talk about that record or Verve or Ride or, I mean, any of those bands. Because it seemed as though there were just a bunch of them and you were the guy.
Mm-hmm. There you go. I don't know why they were the gigs I was offered. I suppose they came. Although the Verve, I actually saw the Verve by mistake. They were supporting someone. I saw them at the Falcon in Camden. And I meant to go and see this other band, and I got there early, or they overrun, and they were just phenomenal. This before they made a record, and they were just incredible. The dynamic and in terms of loud and quiet, which no one was doing at that time, talking 1991 or something. And Richard Ashcroft, the way he was so abandoned, the way he would fling himself around the stage and be in a trance, and the fact that there were no songs, it was all kind of abstract, atmospheric, anthems, but there was no songs, nothing. It wasn't that it was unstructured, but in a really good way. The structure was so organic and what was happening, and the most impressive thing was taking the whole, this is in a pub in Camden, taking the whole thing down quiet, and you can hear silence, it's like spiritual holiness, it's like being in a church or something. Hear a pin drop in a pub in Camden, and suddenly it all exploding, that kind of thing. And the band to be able to do that, and I'd never seen that, never experienced that before on stage, it was especially in a pub in Camden. And so I followed them around, I sort of followed them around. Every time they played, I was there. I went to New Cross and didn't really meet them until New Cross, because I was as soon as I walked in, the band I was meant to see, they were all over me. The manager was talking and all I was looking at was Richard Ashcroft. So yes, and I hassled them and we got to do the record at the Sawmills. So that first record, The Storm in Heaven, was done at the Sawmills over a Christmas period. So we recorded it all before Christmas and came back after Christmas and finished mixing it all at the Sawmills. I wish I'd gone somewhere else. I mean, it was pretty intense and condensed, I suppose. I mean, the Sawmills, there's nowhere to go. It's like River Creek and...
Well, for those people who don't know it, I mean, that's the studio you can only reach at high tide in a boat. Right?
That's right.
Yeah. So, and when you're there. Talk about residential recording. Like, that's it.
Yeah. And if you miss the boat, it's 12 hours. So if they tell you, if the roadie's got to bring the gear in at 4:00, don't be late. If he's half an hour, 20 minutes late, the tide goes down, and then the boat, you can't get the amp, you can't load the boat because the boat's gone down, you see. So you have to be there at 4:00. Or you wait 12 hours, or it's 4:00 in the morning,
So what's the process like taking a band like that, which obviously you loved the unstructured version of what they were, and turning that into a record? Did they want to turn that into structured songs, or did they want to capture what they were already doing? Or
yeah, they did. Yeah, but they knew they had to make an album. They couldn't make a 40-minute song, and they weren't they weren't organized enough to make a concept out of it, like a Dark Side of the Moon thing or something.
Right, or even a Godspeed sort of record.
Yeah, or something like that, you know. So yeah, and there was always lots and lots of ideas, but it was always difficult for them to stop playing. I suppose, you know, they would just keep playing and playing and playing.
Right.
Yeah, my brief was kind of to make sure the songs were tamed in terms of their length, you know, so they would nothing over 5 minutes really, or
Yeah.
you know, keep them as short as possible, you know. And there is something skilled and something really special about condensing all those ideas into a 3-minute single, a 2-minute 59
Yeah.
thing, you know, getting so much in there, you know. And you listen to Tamla Motown or some of the, you know, records that, like, even rock and roll, Jerry Lee Lewis, you know, like Great Balls of Fire or something, and it's under 2 minutes.
Yeah.
It's like 1 minute 58, and there's two verses, 3-4 choruses, a solo, repeat choruses, a middle 8, you know, and an intro, and it's all in 1 minute 58.
Yeah.
And it's fantastic. Beatles are like that, you know, Beatles tracks.
So did the Verve embrace it while it was happening? Were they like working hard to condense it as well, or were they? Okay, so it was.
Yeah, they were. Yeah, we rehearsed in Wigan, and we worked on good takes. Yeah. I mean, the band were kind of what can I say, falling apart a bit because Nick, the guitarist. So Richard didn't play really. I mean, Richard slowly learnt to strum an acoustic, but apart from the bass and drums, all you had was what Nick delivered, the sound what Nick was making, which you know, he was really good, but it was very much the same thing with echoes and space echoes and sustain and drone and stuff, and you just wanted some melody kind of thing, you know, like a line, a lead line, a counter line with the voice or something, some kind of support. And we got the kick horns in, which was just a horn section that I'd been working with on other records. So it's just 2 saxes and a trumpet, really. Sometimes a trombone, but 2 saxes and a trumpet, really. And they came down, and I was surprised that the band loved them so much that they ended up being on all the tracks on the record. And I'm like, you sure you want, you know, this horn section on over half of your record? You know, I think there's only 8 or 9 tracks, but you know, 7 of those tracks have got the horns on.
Yeah, and it does define the record in a way.
Yeah, and it was only because I couldn't get enough from the musicians, the musicians in the band, you know, enough melody or extra, what do you call it? Fairy dust, not fairy dust, but, you know, fruit on the tree.
Meat.
Really.
Yeah.
I wanted a melody or something, you know. And of course, Richard is fantastic, and Richard never sings the same thing twice, you know. He's probably different now, but I don't think he is actually, you know. So every time he'd do a take, he's got different lyrics. You know, he hits the chorus with a different lyric. I'm like, Richard, what's this song called again? Oh, it's called Slide Away. Okay, so Slide Away, and the first line of the chorus is slide away, right? As soon as you come to that, that's the chorus. Yeah, okay, all right, got it. Yeah, good. And they go out, and he wouldn't sing Slide Away. It'd be totally different, you know. He never did it. So no one knows where the chorus is coming, you see. And what would often happen is that Richard would sing, so slide away, and he's not, the chorus hasn't happened, and the bass player would do the run, and then the drummer would go, is this the chorus? And then he'd do the roll. So you've got the chorus where it should be, then the drummer, and then the bass, all in different places. And then you spend ages rehearsing them, going, can't all this happen together? And they do it, and of course it sounds shit. It's like, no, that's not.
Right, it doesn't have the chaos. Yeah.
It's not as good because the organic, flowing, chaotic kind of free wave of stuff that keeps coming, you know, and here comes the bass making the change, you know, was what it was all about. It's a bit like the Fall, getting them to tune up. I remember doing the Fall session, I'm thinking, fucking hell, that's so out of tune with the bass. And so you're stopped and going, look, if you're going to do another track, you really got to tune up. And, you know, and they tune up and it's all perfect. And I spent, you know, half an hour tuning up on a cup of tea. And then they play it. And of course, it's totally different. It's like they're playing different chords or something because it's all, and it's not as good. You know, all the mystery and the kind of sinisterness is because of the tuning being a bit wavy, you know. That resonance that it creates when it's not quite in tune, you know?
Right.
That's why I always hate the other worst thing in studios is guitar tuners. It's guitarists that insist they're in tune because the tuner says it is.
Right.
You know, and you're going, no, mate, it's that G is completely out, you know. And they go, no, mate, it's this, you know, and they will swear by it and then get angry and you think, oh, hang on, you know, we're going to ruin the if any relationship is soured, it's usually over tuning.
Right.
And I'm not even a musician, you know, that's why I listen. I know how out of tune it should be.
Right.
And that's too much, if you see what
I
mean.
You
don't want it perfect, but
no.
You know when there's that sweet spot.
It's also when the guitarists are out in the live room and you hear click in the overheads right before things kick in. It's like, oh, you can't even do it in time, you know. Do it on the beat.
That's right. But no, out of tune bass, you know, overhanging bass notes that waver with guitar chords and things, or with piano. There's no excuse really. Shouldn't, you know. Anyway, guitar tuners, yes, hate them because all the great records, right? All the great records are done without guitar tuners, without drum machine clicks, and without MIDI. So they're the three. You know, all the great records, of course, are mixed on SSL. All the great records have no MIDI, no guitar tuner, and no drum clip.
And there you have it.
Beatles, do the Beatles use fucking guitar tuners? Do you ever see John Lennon plugged into a guitar tuner?
Did they have tuners then? No, I don't think so.
Did Ringo ever say more click in the cans? No, he didn't.
No, he had Paul standing next to him playing cowbell.
Yeah.
All right, we gotta get to Radiohead because we have to get to Radiohead, and I mean, obviously they've got an extensive catalog, but I would still put the Bends as my 1 or 1A in the entire catalog. I absolutely love that record, and whatever you want to say about that record, I will be glad to hear.
Yes, it is quite good. It was a period of time. How did it come about? They sent me a demo. Or, you know, at the time I had the manager and I had different things happening. And in fact, I had to cancel. I was working with Ride, who are from Oxford, along with Radiohead are from Oxford. Ride, I think, got a deal, made records a few years before Radiohead, but Ride were the biggest band in Oxford. And there's me working with Ride. And Ride overran. They overran, and I had to phone up Radiohead and tell them that they couldn't start on. You know, we had to start 2 weeks later because I was still mixing Ride. And of course, they hated it. They hated the idea of this other Oxford band. You know,
right?
Them going in the studio. So that's how it started. No. What the way the record started is they wanted a follow up to Creep. So. EMI, Parlophone in London, they were getting success with Creep, this one song from the previous record, and they desperately wanted a single to follow it up with. That was the first thing we had to record, was the hit single. Before I'd even met the band, it's all they wanted was listen to the demos and tell me which one should be a single, you know, to follow up Creep with. And of course, none of them are singles, really, you know, in the conventional, you know, in terms of Creep Part 2, you know, there was nothing there like that. And anyway, so one of my first meetings, I went to a couple of gigs, and then I went to rehearsal in Oxford, and there was the manager, Chris Hufford and Bryce, the two managers, me, the band, and the guy from the A&R guys from London, but also the guy who was A&R for Capitol in America, and they'd flown over, him and his assistant. So you had American A&R, British A&R, the managers and everything, all in the room. Okay, let's hear what you've got, boys. And they play like 35, 36 songs.
Wow.
And no one can decide what a single is, And I'm like, this is crazy. There's no, you could only go in. So what we really need to do is let's hear them all again. So the band have to play through them all again. And this is the Americans. And they're saying, well, we need to do a short list. We can't decide. So you do a short list. So they go back off to wherever they came from, New York or LA. And we had to decide. So we tied up with 4 songs, which was Nice Dream. I can't remember what the 4 were now. Nice Dream, maybe Street Spirit. No, it wasn't Street Spirit. The Bends, the track, right. The Bends things. I can't remember. I honestly can't remember what the 4 were. It was 25 years ago. And they had to be recorded first. And then we also need, if you're doing 4 A-sides, we need 8 B-sides. Because each single
right, different markets, and yeah.
So we need 4 A-sides, 8 B-sides, and if you've got any time left, you can finish the album.
Yeah, so record an album's worth of material on a single budget, and then make the record.
And you've got 9 weeks at rack, and we're coming down next week to hear what you've done. And we're coming down every night to hear what you've been doing, and it's like, fucking hell, we can't do that. Anyway, so we did that. We spent 9 weeks at rack, and the single, the most commercial single, My Iron Lung, which is, not the one that you would have chosen.
Yeah.
That's all. And that was their first single. And then the band went off and did a tour of Far East, like played Bangkok and Singapore, and I think went on to Australia, and were playing the songs live. And for instance, like My Iron Lung, they played a MTV show at the Astoria in London, and we were at the Manor recording. Oh, sorry, I've jumped the gun a bit. So after 5 weeks at rack, they came back after playing these songs live and said, we want to go in the Manor and redo some of the tracks. So I went to the Manor, again, by myself. Nigel Godrich wasn't there at the Manor. Right. And I re-recorded The Bends, Finished Nice Dream, Punch Drunk, what's that other one called? I can't remember. Recorded about 4 or 5, but the key songs, and then went to Abbey Road and recorded Sulk, the song. So we ended up in Abbey Road 2, just me again without Nigel, doing Sulk. So, half of the record is me on my, engineering, mixing. Well, and so some of the mixing
was Nigel a staff at Rack at that point? Is that?
Yeah.
Right. Okay.
I'd done a few records with Nigel, as Nigel was the tape op.
Right.
And, he was up and coming engineer, wanted to, get sessions. And he tape-opped a band called Denim that I'd done with Felt and the various other things, the Lilac Time, I think. Nigel was a tape-op on Ride. So before Radiohead, we'd been at Rack doing Ride, and Nigel was the tape-op. And then when we come to do Radiohead, and of course Nigel hadn't met the band or anything, and I was like knackered because I'd been doing Ride for the last, and I was like going from one to the other. And I said, Nigel, you just set it up and, you do this and, and I'll just produce kind of thing. Okay, great. So we did all that. And then what happened is that I went off and mixed the 4 tracks that were chosen for the single, Nice Dream and The Bends. And although we redid The Bends, went to Abbey Road and mixed them. Well, enormous expense, but left everything set up at Rack. And during that time, Nigel recorded Black Star and another song, I think. I can't remember.
Was it Fake Plastic Trees, or was that one later on?
No, that was me. That was all.
All right.
Fake Plastic Trees and Just, Planet Telex was all done at Rack. And High and Dry, the track High and Dry, wasn't even done by me at all. I mean, that was done by Jim Warren, who was their PA guy, their front of house guy, Jim Warren. Recorded it at the manager's at Courtyard, the manager's studio in the manager's office. And Phil had just got a new drum kit, this big white drum kit. and it was clean from the shop, and he'd set it up, and the band came in, and Jim and I think Tom said, "Oh, do you remember that old song we used to do? Let's do that." As a rehearsal kind of thing, and Jim recorded, and that's High and Dry.
Wow.
And they only played it once, that was it. And that's why the drum kit is so resonant, because it's straight from the shop, ding a ding a ding ding, and it's great. It's a great tune. And it was on the list of demos, and Tom kept saying, "No, that's too good for this album." And we're like, "What do you mean it's too good for this album?" He said, "I've got a lot of songs that are too good for this album," and of course that immediately causes an explosion with the band.
Oh yeah.
Oh, why aren't we recording the best ones? Why are we recording second-rate songs?
God,
anyway,
funny.
It was full of. It was a great period. Again, every band you work with, you learn new ways of listening. Of what they're hearing, and what they're favouring, what they like or they get off on. If they're really skilled musicians, that have got great ears and musicality, then they all listen a bit different and hear things different.
I love that you learn a new way of listening. And so do you then carry some of those things forward? Because I know for me, I do. Like if I'm mixing a record and I get comments and I realize like, wow, their vision is totally different. And then I'll try and apply that to the next thing, thinking like, wow, that actually worked out really well.
Right.
So,
that's right. Yeah, all different things like that. Like bass, for instance, you work with a band that they like bass, and I mean tone bass, not necessarily bass guitar, but bass, And then when you go to the next band, it's like, fucking hell, they need some bass. They need what this lot have got.
And they might hate
so
bass.
You end up molding. Yeah, and they might hate it. So, yeah, you do carry those things. That's how you build up experience and stuff. That's what your life is. Nothing's clear cut anyway, is it?
No. But I love that you're always paying attention to what the band is after.
Yeah.
So I'm going to ask you an odd question now, because it seems as though you're one of the few people who makes records who doesn't suffer severely from imposter syndrome. You seem pretty comfortable in what you do, and you're not worried about getting found out, which I think a lot of people I talk to, well, like, oh my God, if like the idea that you could walk away from making records for a bit is kind of the big picture version of it. But like, I'm always terrified that everyone will realize that I'm actually not that good and I'm never going to work again. That it's like that's constant for me. But you seem really comfortable in your own skin without any arrogance or any, because I've seen other producers who project this, I am the king of all everything, and you don't have any of that about you. Very definitely serving the project, but also really confident in a really great way. I love the way you talk about the records and your involvement in them, and it's great to hear.
Well, thanks very much. I don't know. I'm just myself. That's the thing, is you will get found out. If you're in an intense situation in a control room with 4 people that are, got bigger egos than you. They've got huge egos, because otherwise they wouldn't be on stage. And they wouldn't be doing this. And they're always competing amongst themselves and competing with others. They all want to be number one, top of the pops, and those kind of things. And so it's not really my job to say I'm better than them. And without the music and the musicians, there's no point in having a studio, really. It doesn't happen. That's what you're actually doing is recording events, musical events. And it's a bit like a photographer, knowing when to press the shutter, and photographers not only knowing how to press the shutter, but having access, knowing where to be at the right place and the right time to press that shutter. Is pressing that shutter, deciding what take to use, when you're doing a take and all those.
Right.
That's the other thing. What does a producer do? He's the first person to speak when the band stop playing.
Yeah.
How many times have you been in a room other than the drummer's girlfriend or something. But, how many times have you been in a room and maybe you're not meant to be producing, and the band comes to the end of the song and they stop and it all goes quiet and they look at you?
Yeah. Yeah.
What are you going to say?
Yeah, it's really that's really
the
interesting.
scariest thing,
I mean, it's obvious, but it's also kind of
especially if it's
pretty
average.
deep. Well, and especially because people are so suggestible too. I mean, some people know, like, oh my God, that was the take. Like you know it every once in a while, but most of the time it's somewhere in between, and it needs an opinion. And yeah, if you're the first one to say it, that's almost setting it in stone.
They're paying you to speak up when they stop playing.
Yeah.
It's funny, all that. Yeah.
Well, and I think a huge part of it is you're saying, like, knowing when to press the shutter and things like that, but it's also creating the environment that you feel like you're going to get that picture. And that's got to be so different on different records, especially with the range of artists you've worked with. I'm sure some of them need to be really pushed. Some of them you've got to completely back off. Some are in between. Sometimes it's a relationship within the band. And
yeah, that's right. All those things. Yeah, all those things. It's let the magic happen, really, because also you're capturing magic. That's recognizable. The reason you choose a take is because that take has magic, and people go, "Oh, but the bass is out of tune." It's like, no, man, that's just fucking magic take.
Yeah.
And you recognize that, and I mean, it's that experience. You guess you know that is the magic take, and that's the one that's going to be used, and somehow it's going to last forever.
Right.
That's the other. I think I always. I think I'm aware of it, but I don't. I suppose subconsciously I let it guide me. Is that this is forever? When you put this vocal down, or when you decide that the tempo needs to be 2 BPM faster, that's going to be that faster forever. Or, when you choose that drum fill or that solo, that's going to be there forever.
Right.
Don't let that scare you,
Well, no, but it means that you're always doing stuff for the right reason. It's never, well, I should do it like this because of what someone said or the drummer's girlfriend or whatever. And I think your discography speaks to that, because I went through a lot of stuff that you've done over the last week, and there's some things where you could say, okay, that's probably in this 5 or 6 year period because of the synthesizer's sound or something like that. But there's almost nothing that sounds dated, or everything makes perfect sense within what it is. It all stands up. It's all compelling. It's pretty damn impressive, actually.
I'm sorry. I'm quite proud of the fact that a lot of the records I've done. Someone once asked me to DJ. This was about 10 years ago. Someone said, "Oh, can you DJ our club in Shoreditch? Just like Saturday night DJ, do an hour or 2 hours or something." And my immediate reaction is, why me DJ? Only if I can play my stuff. So I spent the whole 2 hours playing only my productions, kind of thing, my mixes and my productions. And of course I played XTC magazine, Bebop Deluxe, Bill Nelson, and I didn't play, what can you say, more than this was in the late 90s, I suppose.
Right.
20 years. So I was playing 70s, and everyone was coming up to me saying, "What's this music? What's that music?" And I realized it was really guitar, bass, and drums, or it was guitar and electronics.
Yeah.
Really. Which is always what seems to be what's happening, is guitar and electronics, whether it's from, coming from Talking Heads, or which degree does it go, whether it goes the Kraftwerk way or the Led Zeppelin way.
Right.
You're going towards Zeppelin or Kraftwerk. I don't know. I'm quite pleased that a lot of my records, do sound like they were recorded last week, or released this week.
Yeah.
When in fact, like magazine and modern music from the Bebop Deluxe thing. Obviously, the vocals often. The song, the vocal, what they're singing, the vocal style can date it to some extent. But it's just classic recording. And also I go for performances, really. Backing tracks, always like to get as much down in the backing tracks. And I always think the vocal, when you're doing a backing track, always do it with the vocal, because the vocal is the click track.
Yeah.
The vocal is carrying the melody, and that's setting the tempo.
Yeah.
And the vocal is the click track. And that's what you got to listen to, which means the vocalist has got to put himself into it, because he is the rhythm as well as the melody. He's the rhythm. He's the music.
Yeah.
He's the man up front, and you got to. You shouldn't be there if you can't carry the rhythm and the melody, as a front singer.
Yeah. And I think also there are many times I've been tracking bands where it was the take because of how excited the singer got in the last chorus. Like, it didn't matter if you were unsure. Like, when that singer just screams, there you go. There's obviously something going on. So there are a couple of things that sort of later on, but also a bit different that I'd love to talk about a little bit. The first is Rodrigo y Gabriela. Mm-hmm. How'd that come about? And I mean, did you know of them while they were in Ireland playing, or was that like they came to you to do the record?
They approached me. The manager, I got a demo through the post, They sent me a demo and said, hi, I manage this band, Rodrigo and Gabriela, and this is what they sound like. And then I went to Dublin and met them, and we did the record, and it was huge.
Yeah.
Well, it's not huge. I mean, it sold a few million, but they got signed to ATO in America.
That's pretty huge.
And it's still, that first album that I did in 2007, I think, is 15 years ago, the first album, which I did at Riverside in Bath, which I was trying to do at Real World in the old prod room, but the Irish record company said, oh, no, it's 7 days to do an album in Real World. No, we can't afford that. We need to find a cheaper studio. So I did it in Riverside. And there was accommodation, and they had to share Rodrigo and Gabriela anyway. We can't go into them, but they didn't like the accommodation. So we ended up in this really posh hotel in the centre of Bath. And every night we'd go to the tapas to try all the, the Mexican and the Spanish in Bath. And anyway, we had a good time, and we stayed good friends. And then I went to Mexico and did to their place in Mexico, but it was really untogether. And it was a record called 1111, and they ended up redoing it because they weren't ready to record it, various reasons. Again, it's just them. It's just guitar instrumentals.
Yeah.
In fact, their last record, is an instrumental version on acoustic guitar of Echoes of Pink Floyd.
Right.
Of Metal Echoes, yeah.
Yeah.
The whole thing with the bing, instead of the piano, it's a guitar note through the Leslie. And they do the whole thing on acoustic.
Yeah, they're so inventive. I mixed one record for them, and it's interesting because they don't see themselves as a two acoustic guitar duo at all. Like, the ambition of what they want these records to be is so far beyond what is just two of them in a room, and it's great. And even though they'll kind of go down a path and try doing something totally different and then end up back with just two of them playing acoustic guitar in a room, the vision it's not really what you would expect. I just found it really surprising in how vast they see what you could do with two people and two acoustic guitars.
Yeah. I always wanted, for the second record, let's say I wanted to use, I didn't want to get other people in, although they did get this violinist guy who I didn't really know, and the guy from, is it called Testament? There's a band called Testament, and he played on the record. He came to Mexico. But what I wanted to do was use different guitars for different tracks, because every track is just the two guitars the same. And they like it all being the same. And I'm like, well, maybe we should have the Mexican charanga, is it called, with the armadillo skin, or something, or use an acoustic bass or something. We tried bass and it didn't really work, and different things like marimba, keeping it all wooden, of course.
Right.
And even doing backing vocals, like doing oohs and ahs, ahs kind of in the backing vocal with Rodrigo singing, but it didn't. None of it passed the test. Let's wipe that.
Right. Yeah, it's funny. It's in a way, it's like Stormcock could have just been an acoustic guitar and voice and you would have gotten through the whole record, but it's all the craziness that kind of makes that record. But yeah, and I think sometimes they sort of want that, but then they hear it and it's like the keyboards on the Fall record. Like it's just gotta go. It's gotta go. So one more, and then we should probably get to a couple questions from other people if you're all right to go just a little bit.
Oh yeah, how's the time? Yeah, whatever time you want. I'm here all night.
It's almost beer o'clock, but Baba Mall. Let's talk about that because that's, and now for something slightly different.
Baba Mall, yeah. Well, again, they sent me the tape. I got the phone call and they said, "Would you like to record Baba Mall in Senegal?" I'd already recorded. Well, let's go right back to Abbey Road. And I was a tape op for Fela Kuti. So Fela Kuti did a record. He was signed to EMI in Nigeria, as was King Sunny Addy, and they had EMI had a big catalogue from all around the world. Ravi Shankar, all the great musicians are on EMI, whether it's Fela Kuti or King Sunny Addy or something. But anyway, so Fela Kuti came to Abbey Road 1973 or something and did a record. It's called Live at Abbey Road, and there's Ginger Baker on side 2 guesting, and it's a full band. And I only tape up that, but Tony Allen actually was the drummer on that Fela Kuti record. But then I guess every year or sometimes twice a year, people will come from Lagos, from Nigeria, the producer, sometimes with the band. So I did 2 records with a guy called Sonny Ockerson. Sonny Ockerson, it's called Fire in Soweto, and another one called Holy Wars. We Are Fighting Holy Wars. And he was a big guy in Nigeria. He was, on EMI, top sort of character. And he came, and with the whole band, so you're talking 12 people in the band, everything from 2 drummers, conga, bass drums, keyboards, 2 guys that would just bang sticks together, different types of shakers, because their shaker is a beaded gourd.
Like a shakere.
Yeah. They play like this kind of, and they solo with it. So very often the shaker guy will come on and jump on stage and do a solo with his thing and throw it up in the air and stuff. But yes, so I did that. And then about 1980, I'd left Abbey Road, but because I had the connection with the Nigerian, with Odeon, his name was Odeon Iroji, and he was like the A&R guy in Lagos. And because I had that connection, and Lagos had just gone from 8-track to 24-track, they'd gone from 8-track TG mixer and Studer tape machine to MCI. So they got an MCI 24-track and MCI 24-track desk, which was, of course, much smaller than the TG. And it was like, how can we want a bigger desk? And they end up with a smaller one that's 24-track, Anyway, so they asked me if I'd go over to Lagos and work in the studio and teach them how to record 24-track kind of thing, which was great. So I was 3 months in Lagos recording that ever came in the studio I would record. I can't remember half of the people that I'd worked with there. Sonny Ockerson came and saw me, people, Tony Allen, people from, and all I wanted to do was go to the Shrine, which was a fella's club. And they all said no. Everyone at the studio was like, "Oh, we can't take you there. We can't take you there." You got to remember, I'm the only white guy in the place. And I've got a chauffeur. I've got a full-on chauffeur that anywhere I want to go, he's there just waiting for me to take me anywhere. And I was in the Holiday Inn in Lagos by the sea when I first arrived. I'm just by myself, And of course, the first thing the chauffeur says is, Don't leave the hotel. Whatever you do, don't go out the hotel. If you need to go out, telephone me. Don't leave the hotel. So of course, as soon as I'm in Nigeria, Lagos, Africa. So as soon as he'd gone, I was outside down the streets, and it was really dangerous. Actually, it was really because people come up to you and all sorts of nasty things could happen. Even people come up and want to be basically they want to be your friend, but they also want to know where you live, and very often they have no qualms about asking how much money you earn.
Right.
It's one of the first questions they ask you, you know. Anyway, so I worked out in Lagos, and then I did some records in the 90s. So this again is 10 years later. And for Real World, I did Papa Wemba, who's from Zaire. He passed away recently. I did a record with Papa Wemba, and a couple of Real World records. I did Indian musicians and some other people for Real World. I ended up doing about 5 or 6 records for Real World. And then I had the call for Baba Mal, and we went out to Dakar, and I met Baba Mal and the musicians, and this was with Jumbo from Palm Pictures. Jumbo used to work at Virgin and started the Frontline Reggae label, which was in competition to Ireland and Bob Marley. So when Bob Marley was happening, you know, Jumbo run the Virgin side, and then he formed Mango Records and then Earthworks.
Right.
And he kind of, at the time of Paul Simon's Graceland, Jumbo imported all those South African Soweto beat records, you know, that were going down, that Paul Simon picked up on. So Jumbo was the man who came with us, you know. And we got out to Dakar, and of course, there's 2 people in Dakar, two famous people. One is Baba Mal, who's from the north, from Podor, and Baba Mal's much more, what could I say, rural kind of village person. And then there's Yusu Nadur, who did the record with Nana Cherry and his big mate Peter Gabriel. And Yusu for a start, sings in a different language, sings in Wolof, and is more urban kind of thing. And he had the big studio, and the pressure was to use Yusu's studio, but I knew Baba Mal didn't want to do it. You know, he was like, I'm not going to record in Yusu's studio. He's my competitor. You know, it's like if the Beatles had a studio, would the Stones use it? No.
Right.
Anyway, so, and then it was like, oh, we can't do this, you know, and everyone was, and the studio wasn't very good in the Dakar. It was just like, you might as well have been in South London, really, compared to what it was. It was just a bit hotter, you know. And so they said, well, come on, we'll go out to the house now. We're leaving the hotel and we're going to Baba Mal's house, which is about 150 mile, about 2-hour drive out of Dakar. And we got there, and it's like a compound in the middle of the village, and there's no electricity, and it was just really great. It was just, I just said, let's do it here, definitely. You know, it was like a stable. It was clean. There was a stable, just bare rooms, really, concrete, no windows or no glass on the windows, no wood in the doors. It was just open space.
Wow.
And no electricity. And it's like, how are we going to do this? And I knew Jerry Boyes had done the Ali Farkaturi record in Mali, and Jerry Boyes came from Livingstone Studios, and there's a label called I've forgotten what their label is, Ali Farkaturi, and he had a picture of Ali Farkaturi in this brick farm building in Mali, and there was an 87 on him, you know, and I thought, that's just so great to have a really modern microphone in the middle of the desert, really.
Right.
And so I then tried to find a generator, and really we took 8 DA88s. We took 3 DA88s, 4 DA88s in case one, and I just wrote a list out to Effects Rentals and rented DA88s, a little Mackie desk, some Focusrites, some APIs in a lunchbox, SPX 90 for a bit of reverb, you know, just a kind of standard thing. But made sure I had 87s and 84s and 58s and 57s, really. But as long as you got 57s, 87s and 84s, and you got a good supply of them, so if they get rained on or get sand in them. And sure enough, you know, those things would happen. Mics would go noisy because of the humidity. I did take 2 47s and neither of them worked. As soon as I plugged them in, they didn't work. These great big, 10 grand microphones.
Yeah.
And as soon as they got to Africa, they packed up. So it was great, yeah. And Bob and Marl had the band, and they'd all turn up about 4 in the afternoon because it gets really hot, you see, so you can't really work. This was in September. The band would come about 4 and eat immediately, and so by the time you got into work, it was 8, I suppose, and that would go on till 2, and you work till sun up, really, till 4. So you do 4 till 4, really. And it was fantastic. It was all the people from the village would come and, sometimes they would open the door. You didn't quite know what was going on because everyone was speaking French or African language, and you didn't quite know what was happening. But sometimes the door would open, and all the people from the village with the children and everything would all come in and just sit on the seat there, and the security would don't move. And as soon as one of the kids started standing up, they would kind of tell him to sit down, keep quiet. So it was great. Yeah, what can I say? It was really good, and he had a really good kora player. We didn't cut the tracks live. We cut them with acoustic guitar and kora, and no click really. No, I don't think we used a click at the beginning. And just different people playing, and then we finished off in at Real World with some French musicians that played. It's great. It's called Missing You. Really good sound on it, if I can say. It's got great sound.
Yeah.
For the 88s,
Yeah, it's a great record.
Yeah, I love it.
Really good. All right, I got one more question, and then we'll go on to some. Maybe Mark can come in while you're answering this. But I'm just curious because you've worked with so many people and so many huge records and all of that. Is there anything that you still want to do? I mean, obviously, if a record comes up that you want to do, you do it. But is there anyone like you want to work with who's? And this isn't a could you go back in time and make a Hendrix record? This is stuff going on. Recently, is there anything going on where you think like, man, I really would love to get involved in that? And you don't have to answer if you don't have, nothing comes to mind, but
no, nothing comes to mind really. Nothing comes to mind. Always keen on a good show, and a blues band. I've never done a blues band, but I really love blues music, and I've been doing this blues program, which has kind of stopped now, on Radio Boogaloo Pub in Highgate. Has a radio station, internet radio Boogaloo, and Boogaloo Radio it is actually. And I was doing a blues show I started off every week. I ended up doing about 23 2-hour shows just playing blues music.
Right.
Willie Dixon, chess, and just got really, I'd always been into blues and the history, and almost on it since I was at school, really. It's 12 or 13 at school. We used to have the Jazz, Folk and Blues Society, and we could bring records in, and in the music room on a Thursday lunchtime we could play Bob Dylan or John Lee Hooker or something,
Wow.
And so I was always into blues, and I've never really done a proper blues band like the Red Devils. I don't know if you're into blues or if you've heard the Red Devils.
Yeah.
Which is Rick Rubin and Brendan O'Brien at a club in LA, the Red Devils 90s. It's fantastic. I just love that. It's all about tone. It's all about tone and not trying too hard.
Right. Well, there you go. That could happen.
Yep.
Hey, Mark.
Awesome. Hello. Awesome. This has been great. Thank you so much.
Well, how long have we been going?
God, going 2.5 hours.
That's like 10 minutes.
Yeah.
You run out of tape.
It feels that way. I've been wearing you out. So we'll just do a couple questions, and then that's it, because I think it is beer o'clock. But
yeah.
Great. Cool. All right. Well, I'll start with the most requested question. So the people in the audience have the ability to upvote the question. So the most upvoted question is from Winston. And he says, "Hi, John. Can you speak about the similarity in guitar sounds between the Grapes' I Am Here and Radiohead's Bones? Legend has it that it was your own personal piece of gear giving this cool tremolo guitar part. Thanks."
What was the Grapes of Wrath one? I Am Here. What was the first? I Am Here.
And Bones.
And Bones. Ooh, I don't know.
The secret John Leckie tremolo pedal.
It's obviously from Vancouver. Someone's asked that. Is obviously Canadian. Bones would be Johnny Greenwood's Telecaster with Fender Twin, really. Yeah, Fender Twin. It wouldn't be a Fender Princeton. It was a Fender Twin. Sometimes he used a Blues Breaker pedal. But that was Johnny's guitar setup. We went all around, rented all sorts of gadgets and amps and Marshalls and all sorts of things and gizmos, and we always came back to his Telecaster and his Fender and his Blues Breaker pedal. So that would only be it. On the Grapes, I'm not quite certain actually. I Am Here, because it was recorded in Vancouver. I don't know what amp or anything they have there. I mean, maybe it's just me. I that's the kind of tone I go for. I'd like to, if the guitarist is willing, I'll go out and fiddle with their amp and suggest different things. And because very often it's an rather than fiddling around changing microphones and EQing, I don't like EQing electric guitar anyway. It should kind of almost be flat, really, and it's all about the tone coming out the amp and how far the mic is from the speaker, really. And that's the other major change, is where you put that mic. And I tend to always use a 57 or a 58. Sometimes I prefer a 58, sometimes I prefer a 57, almost touching the speaker cloth and just off center. It's a standard sort of classic position where to mic a loud guitar amp. But it's quite sensitive, it depends, just a quarter of an inch, half an inch away, or, at an angle. Some people start doing these funny angular things with two mics, which I never really got the hang of. It all depends where you put that 57 or 58. But what I do love backing it up with is Neumann 67. Not an 87 at worst, but 67, nice valve warm thing. Again, like experiment with moving it around the speaker cone. But creating a mix of the 57 and the 67 and record it on one track, please. Make that decision what that balance between those two mics is, and that is your guitar track. Don't fuck about recording two mics and saying there's guitar one, there's guitar two. Just make that decision then, what that balance is. And, obviously fiddle about with the phase, but you shouldn't have to fiddle about with the phase unless it's obvious that it's out of phase. The phase is always the distance and the angle of the mics, But yeah, the big thing is, for me, make that decision, make that blend. There's one guitar track and that's it. You agree with that, Andrew?
Oh, God, yes.
You don't want four mics on the guitar.
No. And because I would say 99% of the time I don't touch the balance that comes to me of all those mics. Like, why would I? Four mics,
and they're listening to them all in a straight line.
Or they've messed with whatever it is. That's what they've been hearing. So why would I change that?
Yeah.
I hate that when they say, well, you choose the best one, best mic, you know, you choose the best one.
Yeah.
So, yeah, for your own sanity, mix it down to one track.
Yes.
Awesome. Okay, our next question is from Enrico, and he says, hi, John. Would you mind sharing the drum recording chain and technique used for Pink Floyd's Metal? Thanks.
The recording, what did he say? The drums. Recording.
Yeah, the chain, the drum recording chain.
I got no idea, mate. It's fucking 50 years ago. I can't remember the drum. Okay, so it's recorded in Studio 3, Abbey Road, but it's the old Studio 3. Doesn't exist anymore because the new Studio 3 from the 80s is all around the other way. It's totally different. So it's the old Studio 3. It's a TG mixer, an EMI TG mixer. Drum-wise, I'll tell you what's interesting about the drums, and this is an interesting thing. There's no Shure microphones. There's no Shure 58s or 57s or Sennheiser 4.5 ones. The Sennheisers on the toms, standard thing. None of that at Abbey Road. I never saw a 57 or a 58 until I left Abbey Road, because they never had them. They always had AKG mics. All their dynamics were D19s,
right?
D190s, D1200Es, which had a funny little hypercardioid. They said they sounded shit. So you go for the D19, or you'd use 84s. Very often because they had so many other mics. You'd use 84s on the snare, 87s for overheads, D12 really, but at Abbey Road they were known as D19s, which is exactly the same as a D12, but it's got a bass cut, this funny sort of thing that you pull out and twist round, and there's a 40 hertz cut and a 60 hertz cut. Because those D12, those big our bass drum mics, D12s, D20s, D25s, D19s, they were originally vocal mics, and particularly for television, and they often you see them in sort of 60s TV studios on a boom stand, following the action, So they're not just bass drum mics, although they've got that bass resonance that we love, they are vocal mics. So that would be the setup really. I don't know. It's the tone of the drums as well. Is it that good?
And the room too.
Pretty good memory for 50 years. Yeah.
And the drummer.
Yeah, it's always about the drummer and how he hits it as well. Because if you hit those drums, they won't sound anything like Nick Mason.
Right. Especially me. Okay. Next one comes from Sam Sergey, and he says, "Hey John, can you talk about how you created so much beautiful space on the first Stone Roses record? What was your approach to using delay and reverb on that record?"
My approach was, I guess, what I'd built up with at the time. On that record, there's a lot. I tell you what, there's a lot of is MIDI Verb 2. There's this thing. Alesis did a MIDI Verb, and it's called MIDI Verb 2. Two eyes kind of MIDI Verb, and they used to sell for like £200 or £300. I don't know what they're like now, but they're pretty robust. And basically, you had 99 presets. You didn't know what they were. They were just 0, 1 to 99 kind of thing, and you chose your best number. And if you didn't like it, you just went to the next number. There was no fiddling about with parameters or digging in there with like a lexicon thing. The MIDI Verb was just 99 presets. We loved all that. The 45, there's Taj Mahal type reverb, an infinite one. I think there's a few reverse things, and the short room where you could put things into short room, and they had they kind of barked kind of thing, and the MIDI Verb would do that. Probably, is it 16-bit or something? I don't know. And it was, the best thing was, if you didn't like number 45, then try number 46. You didn't have to dive in there and fiddle about with a little screen kind of thing. So a lot of SPX 90, which again is SPX 90. You see racks of them. You often use 2 or 3 or 4 SPX 90s going to different places. Symphonic is a big set in there.
Yep.
Slow symphonic. And some of the gated reverb or the small room, you fiddle about with some of that. What else is on there's a Nunn Lin on there. I don't think it's very good. AMS reverb, RMX 16. That's all over the Verve record, actually. The RMX 16 is all that reverb on Storm in Heaven is RMX 16. But Stone Roses, that space is, and the plate, I suppose, it's mixed at what's it called? Battery Studios. Battery Studio 1 is basically where it's mixed, nearly all of it, it's the plate that's in the room, as I say, and MIDI Verb, SPX 90, standard sort of tools, but it's again, it's how much you put on. The thing with reverb, you can have a fucking huge long reverb but just have a tiny bit of it, or you can you often find that the shorter the reverb, the more you have to have of it. Often the shorter the delay, the more you have. If you only have a 10 millisecond delay or 20 milliseconds, you need almost equal level. But if you've got a 250 millisecond delay, you don't need much of it. So all those, you know, questions about what reverb do you use, you should be asking how much reverb, as well as what it is how much of it did you use, and that depends on the moment. You know, that's what you're doing. You're crafting it and molding it and that kind of thing. You know.
Awesome. Cool.
One more thing: the reverb, of course, changes on your mix when you're using a compressor. So particularly with an SSL, when you're using the SSL bus compressor, that release time, it really affects what the reverb is. You know, you can, as I say, you can have a long reverb or a short reverb, but you just tweak the compressor on the mix, and you'll find that all your reverbs change. So it's pointless talking about it, really. You just have to do it, you know, fiddle about with it, and you find something responds, something changes, something else, you know.
Mm-hmm. Are there any specific things that you listen for when you're, you know, going to craft it? Do you have like a picture of what you want beforehand, or just kind of react to what comes back?
Yeah, but I couldn't explain it. I couldn't really explain it. It's what feels good, and you know that. And also, you have to get it consistent. You know, it's all very well when you talk about what effects you use in the studio. You got to have something that you're going to use for the whole song. There's no good, you know, having a great sound for the drums on the chorus, because then you have to work twice as hard and get a great sound for the verse. So what you decide on is something that's going to work for the whole song, and that way you get the job done and you get it finished. And it's totally different now, because when you're mixing in the box, you get fucking reverbs everywhere, you know, all sorts of things. But when you're in a studio and you're, you know, analog on a desk, maybe the studio's only got a couple of SPX 90s, a MIDI verb and a plate, you know, and that's probably why it sounds like that. It's much better, you know, to restrict yourself like that, you know. You know, and again, you put it on tape, different compression things really affects depth and length of tails and what you hear and that kind of thing, you know. Sibilance on the vocal, you know, you can be deceived of what you've got on other instruments by what you put on the vocal.
Yeah.
Because, you know, make the vocal wet and the whole thing sounds wet. You know, and you know, you get just a bit of sibilance, and instantly you hear what room the vocals in, and you think the other instruments are in that room again. So, you know, you just do it till it sounds good. It sounds good. I'm sure all mixers say that. What do? You just do it till it sounds good.
Though Al Schmidt actually said something interesting, because I mean, obviously he's kind of the king of natural reverb, and he loves his chamber and things like that. But he was saying for the vocal, it's always two reverbs. It almost doesn't matter what they are, but he can never get it to sound right with one reverb. As soon as he gets two, and it's not like, oh, one's short. He doesn't even care what jobs they're doing. But until you blend them, it just doesn't work.
Yeah, that's right. He's right. Yeah. And you get that from experience, really, or knowing, or what's experience? It's getting out of a problem. You know, someone goes, "Oh, I don't like the sound of the voice." You know, it's like, "Oh, fucking hell, I've got to make it sound good. Otherwise we'll be here all night." You know,
but also
job.
As you say, asking the question the right way around, it's how much of it are you using. So you think, "Oh my God, I can't put two reverbs on; it'll be just so wet." We'll just use less of both, and But it is amazing how much more natural it will feel with just having two reverbs interacting. So
if you can afford them,
yeah. Well, now we can.
Okay, well, we'll ask
one more?
And we'll let you get on with it. So this one is an optional answer. It's from Stuart McCready. And he says, "Evening from Scotland. My pal Mick says you need to tell the story about Mariella the tape op at the Stones Mobile. Cheers."
Who's that?
The question is from Stuart McCready.
Stuart McCready, okay.
And the pal is Mick.
Oh, yeah. Well, what's the story? I don't know if, some people in the UK will probably know a lady called Mariella Frostup, her name is. And she's quite a nice looking, lovely lady. And I haven't actually seen her since 1980, since I did the record. At that time, apparently she was 16. And she came with the Rolling Stones Mobile as the assistant. And Mick McKenna, who ran the mobile and drove it and plugged it in and everything, he'd often drive the mobile, plug it in, and give me the keys and say, here you go, I'll see you in 2 weeks' time or something. And by the way, have you met your assistant? And it was this 16-year-old girl, Mariella, who basically was there to do anything you asked and would cook the food and, you know, stay up all night and do all kinds of things. And with me and Simple Minds, you know, and we had great times together. And Mariella, and the what's the end of the story? The end of the story is that Mariella married Richard Jobson of the Skids, the lead singer of the Skids, who were in the other studio at Rockfield with before Iggy Pop. So you got two Scottish, they're not both Glaswegian, two Scottish bands in the studio. And Mariella, our assistant, marries the singer of the Skids, the other band. Mariella, fantastic. She was great. I don't know how she was as a tape-op, but she was a lot of fun with all of us, you know. And look what I don't know if you know her that well. She was on TV. She does book reviews on Radio 4. She does agony aunts at the back of The Guardian, The Observer, sorry. She often has columns in The Guardian, does book reviews, kind of grown out of pop stuff. She used to have a program, can't remember, something cafe, but she's definitely at Hay on Wye, and that's Mariella Frostup, yeah. Irish, Norwegian, came from Ireland, but she's lovely.
Wow.
Awesome. Nice.
Well, and so we managed to talk for almost 3 hours, and we never even mentioned Muse. So it's...
We need to book another 3 hours.
Yeah, we do. I mean, and just to kind of, it's not even to wrap things up, but it's like one of the things I'd written down after compiling everything is how many, not necessarily the first record, but very early records you've made with bands that have gone on to have very long careers. And it's you know, I think it's a testament to you as well, not only as a record maker, but sort of just getting these bands to figure out how to make records of themselves. Because
who they are, what they do.
Yeah, exactly. To really have an identity. I mean, and The Verve is an obvious example because the record is nothing like what they were doing live, but every band goes through that. That sort of, is that what we sound like? You know, moment in the studio. And you've shepherded so many bands in different styles through that, that it's amazing. Absolutely amazing.
Thank you. I don't know these things unless people tell me.
Well,
I just do what I do, you know. So
yeah, well, you do it very well.
I want the best. We said about musicians, you know, I want the best record. You know, it's there forever, and I want the best record for the band. You know, I know you have to keep the record company and the manager happy and the whole whatever finance side, but really it's always the music that comes through. I mean, no one moans about how much the Muse record cost or how much the Stone Roses record cost. Now, it's even if it wasn't successful, no one would talk about what it cost or anything, or you know, or even who the A&R guy was, you know, or whatever. But you know, the producer, you know, and they always. If it's a flop, you blame it on the producer, and if it's a hit, it's the band. You know?
It's the SSL.
It's the SSL. Yeah, the first person they blame is always the producer.
Yeah, it's the wheel of blame. The wheel, you get your name all over that thing when they spin it. It's that's it.
But yes. Did you want to talk about Muse? Muse is a big, it's a big thing. I met them again from the Sawmills. So going back to where I did Storm in Heaven, the Verve record, and also where I did Fool's Gold, Stone Roses, Fool's Gold, and also where I did Cast. We forgot there's a band in Liverpool called Cast. I did 2 albums of them. Both of the time the tracks were recorded at the Sawmills. And do you know, we had 8 top 20 singles. We had 4 top 10 singles and 8 top 20 singles with Cast. Each record was just what the record company want. They want 4 hit singles for every album. And we did it with Cast. And it was really strange because I think we were mastering the second album or John's solo record. And in the mastering room, there's the Guinness Book of Hit Singles. And I go, have you ever read that, John? And he's like, no. I said, do you know you're in it? And he's like, no, are we? And we looked at it, and there it was in full black. And Guinness Book of Hit Singles, we had 8 the top 20 singles there. You know, I think we had number 3s and number 4s. No number 1s, but, you know, it was great. What we talking about? Muse, yeah, Sawmills. So, yeah, those records were recorded there. And Muse, every time I went down to the Sawmills in the 90s, Dennis, who ran the studio, kept telling me about this local band of 14-year-old lads who, you know, can't get any gigs because they only play on you know, and can't play in the pubs and things because they were too young. Every year he would tell me how great they were. And this was Muse. And my manager, Safta Jaffrey, got word of this, heard the demos, and thought, "Wow, this is you know, this is really good. I'm going to move in and promote Muse," which he'd never done. He'd only managed producers before, and kind of took on Muse and said, "Let's get a," you know, because he was a producer manager, he knew every A&R man in the world, really, all over Europe, all over UK, USA, you know, New York, LA. He knew all the A&R men and what they were looking for, what kind of acts, and what was happening, finger on the pulse stuff, just to get, you know, jobs for producers. And so Muse came along, and they'd already recorded a few EPs, few tracks, and they were great and they were happening. And they hadn't played up in London, so we set up a showcase at, I don't know, the Water Rats place, and there was a demo tape of their EP. And, you know, no one came. No one reacted to no one came to the shows. No one replied to the demos. You know, there was no response at all. So Safta said, "I'll blow this. We'll go to America." So he went to CMJ's in New York, which is a kind of New York South by Southwest showcase thing. Bands go there, and they played there, and more people come. People were interested. A&R people were interested, and when they came back, they flew back to London, and the next day, Sony Records said, "Oh, we really like your band. Can we fly them out to LA for a showcase on the West Coast?" So they paid for the band to fly to LA to do a showcase for Sony, and Safta was really crafty, because what he did, he kept the band on an extra day and booked the rehearsal room for another day and invited all the other record companies, you know. And Guy Asiri from Maverick, from Warner Brothers, turned up, and the band played 2 or 3 songs, and basically he said, "What do you want? You know, you're signed, you know, anything you want, write down what you want and you can have it, you know." And he signed them for, like, I don't know, 5 albums or something. And that's why they're still on Warner's. And we moved ahead. We did the first album, which was, again, we were at Rack. I suppose we recorded 5, 6, 7 of the songs, and the others were, I won't say tarted up, but were the demos we'd revocaled and different things. So that was the first album, Showbiz. And then the second album, Origin of Symmetry, which really set them off, really. And they just climbed up and up and up then, you know, mainly from the live thing. And Safta was really good because he got the Americans to pay for the album, to pay the costs and pay me. So he had the rights to the album, and he could go all around Europe and Australia and Japan. And all he wanted was tour support, because the album was made. He didn't big advances. He just wanted advances. And the band being young, the band being like 19 years old, all they wanted to do was travel the world and play gigs. And that's what they did. He got them on a Foo Fighters tour and a Chili Peppers tour. And it all happened with Rage Against the Machine, System of a Down. And Muse were the guys from Devon, the British guys, but they suddenly, when they came back from a tour of Europe, they suddenly became men, really. They suddenly, like, completely got 100% confidence. They could, leap around the stage. Matt was smashing up guitars every night, pulling all the curtains down, jumping into the audience, all those things. Before he went on tour, he wasn't like that. He didn't talk to the audience. He kept his head down, and then suddenly he just exploded. And we saw him at Glastonbury. They went from being the first band on at Glastonbury at the first tent And each year they went up and up and up, and
Yeah.
they headlined the John Peel stage, and then they end up on the main stage, and now they're headlining, the biggest band in the world.
Yeah.
So they're great, yeah. And we got on great. I don't know what. I really dug their musicianship. Really, they were really. I thought Matt was one of the most amazing, sensational musicians I've ever met. Really, the way he throws, and he plays guitar. I don't want to say he plays guitar like Hendrix, but he has a. At first, you might mistake it as a sloppiness, like
Right.
his hands and his fingers, they're like all over the place. But he's doing that because it's part of him. It's an extension of him. He doesn't have to think about it or even look at where his hands are going. They just fly. And the same with piano. When we were doing even the first album, but the second album, you had to drag him away from the piano because all he would do would sit there playing Rachmaninoff.
Right.
He'd call it Rachmaninoff, but he just made it up. All this. He wasn't trained or anything. It's not like he had music in front of him, and it was always kind of frantic and up and down and really colourful, high energy kind of stuff. Which is the opposite to Tom York. Really, 'cause Tom would come in and play piano very quietly to himself. At 9 o'clock in the morning. Every time we'd start at 11. Tom would be there on the piano, and he's been there since 8:30. So Tom would always get a few hours on the piano. You got Steinway or a grand piano, you can tell who the musician fiends are because they get an opportunity to play a grand piano. They're there all the time. Feel it. That's the real thing. It's like musicians, bands that always have an acoustic guitar with them. The Lars. Cast, Richard Ashcroft, they've always got a guitar within reach. I haven't at the moment. I wish but always got a guitar with them that they sleep with it.
Yeah.
And then when they see a grand piano, they go crazy on it, and you can't get them off. I love that. I mean, that's like dedication. That's real musicianship.
Yeah. I think that's a really good place to end it. And it's it's a really good transition too, because next week is Rich Costi, who can pick up the Muse story from a bit further down the road.
Right. Yeah. Because he mixed some stuff, and that all came after. Yeah. Does he live in England?
No, he's back in LA now.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. Great. Excellent.
So he'll be well rested, and I'll be getting ready for beer o'clock. So.
Hey, it's 10:30.
I know. Thank you so much, John. This is just absolutely... Okay. I mean, and I feel like there's so much stuff I didn't even get to, so maybe we will do a part 2 or something.
Yeah, we can do anything.
Maybe we can do it in person, though. That'd be good.
In person, yeah.
Yeah.
I quite like this Zoom thing. I think it's great. But
yeah.
No, we missed out my 3 American acts I'm really proud of, which is Los Lobos.
Yes.
Dr. John, and My Morning Jacket.
Yes, I know.
My American heritage bands that I'm just honoured to have worked with,
God, all right, well, that's part 2. We'll start in America.
There are a lot of requests in the chat room for part 2, so.
All right. Good. Awesome. Excellent.
All right.
Thank you so much, John.
Signing off.
All right.
Awesome. Bye.
All right, thank you.
Bye, guys.
All right.
Okay,
see everybody.
Bye, John.
Bye.